So I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District regular board meeting of February 9th, 2021 to order. And we'll just do a quick roll call. In the boardroom today, we have Director Arbor and Director Hillian, and online we have Director Hamir, Director Grieve, Director Grant, Director Swift, Director Cole-Hamilton, Director McCullum, and Director Morin. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And today we have Article 25 of UNDRIP. Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditionally owned or otherwise occupied and used lands, territories, waters, and coastal seas, and other resources, and to uphold their responsibilities to future generations in this regard. And with that, we move to the in-camera recommendation.
I'll move.
Second.
Hamir and Morin, thank you. And that is under Community Charter Section 91E, K, and 92B. Is there anyone opposed to going in camera following the regular meeting? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to adoption of minutes for January 19th, the regular board. Can I get a second?
Second.
Hillian and Hamir, thank you. And is there anyone opposed to adoption? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we also have minutes for, that was for the special meeting, and we have the regular board minutes for adoption for January 26th.
Move it.
Thank
Second.
you. Director Grieve and Hamir, anyone opposed? And that's carried. And we're on to F, public input. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's just a reminder to the public that we are receiving input with respect to the financial plan. And you may submit your written comments, questions, or feedback to the regional district through our website. We have received some correspondence with respect to the RGS, and that is later on in the agenda under new business items. And I'll just refer to Kevin Duval, Manager of Financial Planning, to provide an update with respect to the financial planning process and where we are.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to the directors, good afternoon. So what's up on the screen at this point is our annual financial planning process dashboard. So as you'll see, we're deep into our financial planning process, at least with respect to the public presentation of all of the budgets that make up our financial plan. So of course, we have 98 different service budgets that we present to you over the course of this 7 or so week period. At this point today, we will be presenting 14 service budgets to the board. And with the conclusion of that, then we'll really just have a few remaining budgets that go to our water committee, sewage commission, and some final ones that will be going to our electoral area directors in early March. So yeah, we're well underway. And then of course, from that point, we will then kind of revisit everything at the completion of our year end, finalize our recommended budget. That is what then would be brought forward to by way of an annual budget bylaw in March, ahead of required adoption at by March 31st.
Great, thank you. I believe Director Grieve has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair and the CAO to Kevin. Just to be absolutely clear, these are only the proposed budgets that we are approving today. They're non-binding in that we get to look at them when they're actually a consolidated budget in March, correct?
That is correct. So as they weed through the various committees and commissions, these are the proposed budgets at this point. Over the course of this process, if there are any directions given to staff to make changes or amendments to the budget, we will then undertake to do that. Those then get brought into what we call our recommended financial plan. That plan is typically posted on our website once set, and that recommended plan then makes up what's produced in our annual budget bylaw. The only changes post that would be once we receive the revised assessment rules from BC Assessment, just updating our apportionments between the participants.
Correct. So this is not the point where we die on the hill. Thank you.
No.
Any further questions? Thank you, Kevin. So we're on to reports. And the first one we have is the Black Creek Oyster Bay Committee minutes from January 25th. And this is a vote of the full board. Is there any, oh, Director Hillian? Can I get a second? Okay, Director Arbor, thank you. And is there anyone opposed to receipt of these minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We're on to item 2, Electoral Area Service Committee minutes from January 25th.
Move minutes.
Director Grieve,
Second.
Director Moran, thank you. Anyone opposed? And those are carried. We're on to item 3, Comox Valley Recreation Committee minutes from January 26th.
Move receipt.
Arbor Cole Hamilton, thank you. Anyone opposed to receipt of those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We're on to item 4, Board of Variance from January 25th, or sorry,
Move receipt.
27th.
Second.
Warren and McCollum, thank you. Anyone opposed to those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. On to item 5, the 2021 to 2025 proposed financial plan budget presentations.
Move receipt.
Hillian and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Kevin DeBell will provide a summary of these budgets in a presentation, answer any of your questions, and then recommendations are provided with respect to the budgets for the 5 or 6 services that are outlined.
Thank you very much. Again, through the chair to the directors. So what is in front of you today is a presentation for a collective of 6 different service budgets for your consideration. The rationale for bringing these 6 budgets forward collectively are these represent fairly stable, smaller sized budgets that, again, in past we have presented to you collectively. If at any time there are any substantial changes within any of these service budgets, we will carve them out and present those to you separately, as we did with the community justice service last year. At this point, with respect to the budgets that are in front of you, there was no recommended actions identified for any of these services as part of our Rethink Comox Valley. They were very much stay the course budgets, contractual largely in nature with various service providers in the community, and deemed, key services to continue to undertake. As noted, these budgets represent key community partnerships and initiatives within the community. We work with a multitude of local agencies, commissions, or local governments in the case of the cemetery service to make all of these various things happen. One item of note I did indicate in the presentation was with respect to the Economic Recovery Task Force action items. It did highlight the Comox Valley Airport and the Commission specifically. And in fact, it talked about the importance of the airport and airport expansion and how key that could be to economic recovery. So it's something, as I'll speak to that budget in a minute, that the directors may want to consider going forward. Just to give you a quick work plan highlights for each of these services. So with respect to regional feasibility services, function 150, this is one of our 6 feasibility services that we use to undertake the assessment with respect to any new proposed services that might be looking to undertake. On a regional basis, which all participants pay into, both municipalities and our electoral areas. There's just 2 items in there currently, for 2021. One being the Regional Park Service reinstatement study. So this is in relation to looking at the ins and outs of restarting that particular service that's been dormant for quite some time. So we have $25,000 in the feasibility service budget to accommodate for that. The only remaining items in there are carry forward items going back to 2011 with respect to the water supply strategy implementation. We continue to work with our engineering services to look at what's transpiring, certainly within our larger water services, and what continued value or initiatives we might be able to do with the carry forward funds that remain in this particular area. Moving over to victim services. So victim services function 200. This largely supports 2 key agencies, the Comox Valley Transition Society and also the Comox Valley Crime Stoppers program. Currently, the operating grant for the Comox Valley Transition Society is in place till the end of this year, 2021. So we'll be undertaking a review and potential renewal of that going forward into this year. That currently sits at about $80,000 a year, and we had some cost of living increases for subsequent years built into the budget currently. With respect to Crime Stoppers, that's an ongoing annual contribution that we provide to the Crime Stopper program that has been set at about $12,000 a year and has been that for a number of years. With respect to community justice, function 205, that again, the bulk of that is to support the Comox Valley Community Justice Center here in the Valley. And that contract was actually just renewed with them back in 2019. So the current 5-year operating agreement goes through the end of 2023. And currently we're providing $60,000 a year to that organization. There we go. Moving on to cemetery service, function 400. So this particular service supports a variety of cemetery works that are undertaken annually by the city of Courtenay. This year in particular, there were 2 items of notice, one being the niche area phase 2 upgrades. That was a bit of a carry forward from last year. We also have some ongoing drainage improvements that they'll be undertaking as well. So as I've indicated there's $160,000 in overall projects slated for 2021, which includes about $45,000 in carryover projects from 2020 that were incompleted. Moving over to emergency shelter land acquisition, our function 450. This service has largely been dormant since 2010. We keep it kind of active at an absolute minimum. The last project that was undertaken within this service was the 2010 Cliff Avenue property purchase that was then, I believe, transferred over to the city of Courtenay 2 years after that. And largely with the establishment of the homelessness support service 451 in 2015, that's really where the bulk of the effort has been undertaken at this point. And then lastly, with respect to the Comox Valley Airport, our function 795, this service is largely in place to help support the long-term debt that was undertaken back in 2004, I believe, for the airport expansion. We are coming to the end of the life of that debt. So that debt currently is slated to retire in 2023. What the board may want to consider going into this year is opening some dialogue with the local governments and the airport commission just to discuss what the future may be for the service ahead of that 2023 wind down of that particular debt. Just quickly, a sense of the respective budgets for these services, and I won't go into any kind of detail. I mean, they are pretty straightforward. All of these services are largely funded by tax requisition that are outlined there. I do indicate the rates per thousand within the staff report. And again, the last 2 budgets that are in there. So as you can see, with respect to emergency shelter land acquisition, that one is actually funded solely by small contributions reserves, again, to keep the service active. So there hasn't been a requisition in that service for a number of years now. With respect to airport, as I said earlier, that's largely there to support the debt repayment for the airport. And at this point, I'd certainly welcome any questions.
Great, thank you, Kevin. I'm just bringing up the list here. I think Director Hamir was first.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Kevin for the overview. My only question was around function 450, the emergency shelter land acquisition. I see that we don't have any requisitions, and I'm just questioning if this is actually a good way to move forward. I've spoken to Ms. Capelli from the Homelessness Coalition, and the fact, land acquisition is a really difficult, it's a really difficult hurdle to overcome in order to build any kind of housing, be it homelessness support or affordable. And so I'm just questioning if it, strategically or in the long term. I know we did do a purchase on Cliff Avenue many years ago, But without any kind of funding into this service, I personally think we're losing opportunity of supporting the homeless community. We have quite a high number for the size of the community that we are. And whether or not, my fellow directors would be supportive of us having a relook at this. Maybe not for the 2021 budget, but in the future.
Steph, want to respond?
Yes, thank you through the chair to director. So certainly that opportunity does exist at the board's discretion. At this point, there isn't any kind of defined strategy identified, and but again, certainly we could have that conversation ahead to the 2022 budget year.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Grieve?
Thank you very much. And through the chair and CAO back to Kevin, I definitely have been thinking along the same lines as Director Hamir on this, because I was in the room when we actually approved this function and brought it forward with a alternate approval process. I think we had 8 people in opposition, and that included Hornby Island and Denman Island. So I think it's very important to realize that we are in a crisis situation. And I think, as Director Hamir alluded to, the most difficult thing to get is land purchase, because just about everything, any grant funding up there precludes land purchase. So, developing operations, capital, all that stuff, but not the actual purchase of the land. So I know that we have a maximum requisition of $463,000 some odd dollars. So that's not chump change. That's something we can actually turn into a real project. Again, once you get the ball rolling, you've got all kinds of partners that can file in and in kinds that we can double that figure. So I too would like us to look in the future, in the not too distant future, into resuscitating that dormant service. And my question is it just a matter of dusting it off, or do we have to go back? As long as we're within the parameters of supportive housing or emergency shelter land acquisition, we should be able to reconstitute that function, correct?
Through the chair to the directors, I'll answer this the best I can. So unlike the regional park service that was truly dormant for the last number of years, this service has been kept active. There just isn't a requisition currently in place. So the current purpose for the service, and I'll read this out to you, is for emergency shelter and supportive housing land acquisition. So again, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
So really, it would just require some sense of what the I guess your 5-year strategy would be, and then we would kind of build a budget around that accordingly, and then present that obviously to the board for your consideration.
Can I have one subsequent?
Go ahead.
So if we were going to look into that, does it have enough money in that function to do a feasibility study, or would we have to go to our feasibility study function to get the money?
I might suggest that this is a very good conversation for staff to be informed of your interest in this. There is definitely a process to be undertaken that's maybe a little beyond our scope to discuss tonight. We can get back to you.
That's never stopped us in the past.
Yeah, whether there has been study work that helps advance these decisions. Obviously, there's community groups that we want to undertake this work in association with. So you've given us some things to think about and report back to you for sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions, Director Arbour?
Yeah, thank you. This time last year, I think alternate Director Price had made a good point about fairness and equity, and because I'm pushing that in a lot of places right now, it has to go both ways. And her concern was in the cemetery service, area A, C, and Cumberland. Cumberland may have a cemetery, I don't know, but in the case of area A and C, I'm wondering, her complaint was that we don't contribute to the service and we benefit from it. So I'm wondering if in 2021, staff could come back with a report looking at the governance model of that little service. Well, not the governance model, sorry, the participant model, and whether consideration should be given to area A and area C contributing to the service.
And just for clarity, that's the cemetery service function 400.
And just for clarity, yes, we do have a cemetery in Cumberland. Okay, any further questions? We are still on receipt of the proposed budget for functions 150, 200, 205, 400, 450, and 795. And it's above the whole board. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move recommendation 1. Second.
McCollum and Moran, thank you. And the recommendation is to approve the proposed budget for the regional feasibility study service. Is there any discussion? And is there anyone opposed to approving of it? Okay, that's carried, and we're on to recommendation 2.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Cole, Hamilton, and Hillian, thank you. And this is for a proposed financial plan for victim services. Is there anyone opposed? And that's carried. On to recommendation 3.
Second.
Hillian, McCollum, thank you. And again, it's a vote of the full board for the Comox Valley Community Justice Service. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, we're on to recommendation 4.
Move 4.
Second.
Hamir and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And this is for the cemetery service for Courtney Comox in Area B. And is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and we're on to recommendation 5.
I'd like to move 5 with a small amendment. I'd like to include that report we brought back in 2021 as to the possibility of reconstituting this service.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the amended motion? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Or sorry, hearing and seeing none. That's carried. We're on to recommendation 6.
Move 6.
Second.
McCollum and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And that's for the Comox Valley Airport Service. And it's for the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to item 6, which is the financial plan for search and rescue service, function 265.
Move receipt.
Second.
Cole Hamilton and Hamir, thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much. And
Sorry,
Doug,
Chair. Sorry, can I jump in? I need to recuse myself from this item because I'm married to a search and rescue member.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you, Director McCollum.
Did he find you?
and thank you. Doug DeMarzo, General Manager of Community Services, is here to present the financial plan for search and rescue and answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Through the chair to the board. Just here to speak to the financial plan for search and rescue, Service 265. I think as we move forward, it's important to share the board's strategic priorities here. Number 1 being fiscal responsibility. This cost is shared across the region where it really supports multi-purpose vehicles. And again, the CV Ground Search and Rescue continues to operate as a nonprofit here and providing some fiscal aid to them to continue their services for the great work they do in our community. And in the community partnership, it should just be noted here that staff over the last year worked very closely with the CV Ground Search and Rescue to look at possibilities for their building in upcoming future. One of the sites that we did identify was a water treatment plant as a possible site. And at the end, it was decided it was not a viable option, and search and rescue is going to continue to look at the Moray Avenue as their lease comes to an end. So quite a bit of work was done with them over the year, and it was a good exercise. Really, together with the Rethink Comox Valley, this is really about emergency services and more specifically, also about vehicles. And it really provides this continued readiness for an emergency or disaster, while initiating both a conservative and flexible approach to response throughout the valley. So as you can see here, everything remains relatively stable from the 2020 operating grant to the 2021 grants. We're basically looking at all organizations within the same parameters as they've been consistently supported. The one notable difference is the search and rescue does not have a capital item, and really last year was the first year that you really saw a capital item of 3750 supported. So we're back to our consistent support that we've been able to remain stable throughout the years. So just to kind of recap, the various search and rescue organizations funded under this function provide a valuable public safety service to residents and visitors in the Comox Valley. These organizations throughout the year were deployed to incidents that included water safety, missing persons, or motor vehicle accidents. Many of these organizations are staffed by volunteers who undertake extensive specialized training in order to respond to search and rescue incidents. The service has been operating successfully over the years and is sustainable to continue operating. You have any questions?
Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And I've had two conversations over the last 2 years. This is, I guess, an extra territorial outfit that provides quite a service to Hornby, Denman, Fanny Bay, and Buckley Bay. And that's the unit, the search and rescue unit based out of Deep Bay. And they approached me twice to see if our board and the CVRD would contribute a small contribution, acknowledging that they are the first responder for search and rescue around Hornby, Denman, and Fanny Bay. We don't, the unit from Comox, their response time from Deep Bay is much, much quicker. So I know this would fund something that is actually outside of our jurisdiction, but I want to acknowledge they do provide a service and respond to every call that's made around those areas. So I wonder if the board, if there's a position to at least the staff talking with those folks in 2021 and maybe coming back next year to see if we could include them as part of the search and rescue supports.
Thank you very much for the suggestion. What we might do is just look more broadly at search and rescue, because all units provide service across their boundaries, and there's probably examples where the ones that we are sponsoring are providing service to other areas. So maybe the bigger picture in terms of that overlap would help in your consideration of such matters, and we can look to do that this year.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, so we're still on receipt of the budget for search and rescue. It's the vote of the full board, with the exception of Director McCollum, who has recused herself. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, we're on to the recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Hamir and Lauren, thank you. And it's to approve the financial plan. Any further comments? And anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We're on to item 7, which is the Comox Valley Emergency Program Service Function.
Move 7.
Second.
Grieve and Hamir, and Director McCollum, you've joined us again. Okay, we'll just assume she's coming back. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And we now move on to the Comox Valley Emergency Program Service. And this budget presentation will be done by both Kevin Duval and Howie Siemens.
Thank you very much again through the chair to the directors. So yes, I'll just be providing a quick overview of this particular service. and then be highlighting one particular area that is included in the recommendations in front of you today. And then I'll be passing it over to Howie to provide you a synopsis of the work plan highlights and work plans going forward for this service. So the Comox Valley Emergency Program Service was established back in 1991. At that time, it was a service established for the benefit of the electoral areas and in the provision of emergency preparation activities. 5 years later, in 1996, the service was expanded to include the member municipalities by way of an agreement or contractual obligation. And every year since then, we've had 5-year kind of recurring agreements with respect to providing services to the municipalities. The current set of 5-year agreements are due to expire at the end of this year, 2021. So we have already started reaching out to the municipalities and having conversations around what the future delivery of these services would be through the Comox Valley. In 2012, the board of the day, due to a number of challenges and opportunities, decided that they wanted to kind of split the activities in the service. So the current 270 service then morphed and created the 271 service, which falls under solely the auspices of the electoral areas. That particular service largely drives a lot of the business continuity programming and other activities directly for the rural areas. However, when that split did occur, the two services continued to share the same establishment bylaw and thus the same maximum requisition to support the requisitions for both those services. We have now encountered an issue where we are really encroaching on that maximum requisition quite substantially. And therefore, a recommendation that's in front of you today will be to authorize a 25% lift or increase to that maximum requisition so that we can continue to provide the valuable work that Howie and his team undertake within this service. As I mentioned before, we are looking at just kind of the overall delivery of how services would be undertaken in this service, and we'll be coming back kind of later in the year. So at this point, the existing maximum levy that supports both of these services is 3 cents per thousand. What we would be recommending and what is included in the recommendations in front of you is to increase that to a new maximum requisition representing the greater of 281,809 or 3.75 cents per thousand. And so I will leave it there for this point, and then I'll pass this on to Howie.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Through the chair to the directors, thanks for the opportunity to present our 270 emergency program budget. To start off with the 2021 work priorities. Just on our slideshow yesterday, I did not offer a lot of highlights for our 2020 work plan projects, but you can find them in Appendix A of the report. Many of our projects are understandable that the emergency program staff moved into the activation and operation of a regional emergency operations center. And so a lot of our normal work plan items or projects were either delayed or postponed in that process as we try to address health, prevention, and safety measures. So proposed priorities for 2021 is the BC Safe Start refund grant in the amount of $100,000 to enhance the community partnership and support vulnerable populations through the Emergency Operations Center. This aligns with the community needs identified through the outreach to our community partners. The other part is another further $100,000 earmarked to provide for the EOC technology and system upgrades, which I am titling the Regional EOC Outfitting Project, to achieve a virtual and functional face-to-face level 3 EOC if another event does occur while we were still trying to address COVID. At this time, this report, we are just in discussions with doing the earthquake exercise design and delivery still with our contractor, Calian. They are hoping to, with discussions with some of our design team, is to modify the original scope of the exercise and not do as much in the community aspect of it. But more about addressing the EOC efficiencies and working with training opportunities for the regional policy group, as well as the EOC staffing teams, with some key components of radio communications and working with our informational officers to do public information communication outreach. The other key piece of our work plan will be this year is the full revision of the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program. We feel this program, we've already done some outreach already through some of the existing emergency community programs out there right now. And we've heard some great feedback, and we'll be engaging them, the leaders of those community teams, to help us to design a program that they see they would like to deliver, and not a sort of a provincial level training program or delivery program that's been in the past. It is also hoped that in 2020 work plan, the information that you'll see is provided in, as I said, an appendix, appendix B. But it all depends on what we move forward as we see the impacts and measures and orders of the health to address COVID. So the comparables from 2020 to 2021, the maximum levy, as Kevin has said, was set to 3 cents per thousand tax value. Again, due to the growth and the importance of the service being now a recognized core service, and the recognition of what we have learned from the COVID-19 through our after action report, is to maintain the service level for both functions 270 and 271, which shares a common establishment bylaw, increase the maximum requisition by 25% for the 2021 fiscal recommended, which will result in, as Kevin indicated, to 281,808 or 303.75 per thousand. The overall budget for 2021 for 270 totals 613,133, or an increase of 245.92 over 2020, which the 200,000 of this is from the BC Safe Start COVID grant funding. Revenues and recoveries, there are 3 CVRD functions that contribute to 8,000 to 82 to the service. This is to reimburse the use of Connect Rocket, our mass notification system. We call Get Notified, which is a public media process that we have been using for boil water, but it also has been increased to add other hazards to that. There are also contributions from the Comox Valley Search and Rescue through operations and maintenance of Moray Avenue, which we are now sharing a lease with and support each other in the operation of that facility. And it was acting for most of last year as the backup EOC. CVIP will continue seeking grants. We have just heard actually that we have just been awarded funding for some more fire smart initiatives, so that's be a positive as we move forward. Personnel costs for 2020 are proposed to be increased by 21,567 for 2020 due to some additional CVRD support staff allocations being charged to reflect the ongoing support being provided for the service. Personnel costs are broken down into emergency program coordinator is 90%. The deputy emergency program coordinator's position is 20%. Equivalent, as well as a further 0.25 full-time equivalent, which includes a general manager of community services and a branch assistant. Reserves are estimated balance in the future are to be for 2020 51,959 by the end of 2025, with ongoing increments contributions in a reserve to an estimated of 92,829. So on the screen, you'll see the table within your report as well. This is just to show you a visual of what each of the electoral areas and the local governments will contribute to the budget if it is adopted. And just to reiterate that the service of sales of service for the Comox, Cumberland, and Courtenay is through a contribution based on converted hospital values. So the strategic drivers that the board has given us direction to incorporate in all our work that we do and focus. So the fiscal responsibility is a full strategic program review in 2021 of the Comox Valley Emergency Program in preparation for the Provincial Emergency Program Act review and outcome of what some legislative changes may occur. Community partnerships through the EOC with BC Restart fundings to support Comox Valley non-for-profits who support the needs of the vulnerable population in the region. Climate change, climate crisis and environmental stewardship and protection. Focus will be on the potential changes to emergency management as part of the provincial modernization project, but also continuing the work directly with the Comox Valley Regional District's Planning Department on the sea level rise and coastal flood risk mapping projects. So the tax impacts for this budget this year will be based on 2020 completed assessment roll. The estimated residential tax for this service expected to be 0.154 per thousand. In 2020, it was 0.143 of taxable assessed value. For residents with an assessed value of 500,000, the total tax impact will be $7.70. In 2020, it was $7.30. Today, before you in the report, the recommendations being proposed today is the board consider 3 readings of the subsequent adoption of the amended to bylaw number 1341, being electoral area A, B, C, emergency program extended service establishment bylaw 1991. To increase the maximum requisition by 25% to be available for the 2021 fiscal year in accordance with the Local Government Act and the Regional District Establishment Bylaw Approval Exemption Regulations upon receiving written consent from the directors from electoral areas A, B, and C, and being participants in the service. The next recommendation is that the proposed 2021 to 2025 financial plan for the emergency program function 270 be approved. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thanks to Kevin and Howie. Are there any questions? Okay, Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much, Howie and Kevin, for the report. I'm just curious if you can give us any further update on the potential disbursement of the $100,000 for vulnerable populations. I know you've indicated in the report that this would be up to the EOC directors. Part of the reason I ask is that City of Courtenay has been approached by Lush Valley requesting $100,000 for ongoing provision of food in response to the pandemic. And that's something that could be nicely be taken care of with this fund, but I'm imagining that you have lots of other possibilities as well. So I'm just wondering if there's any indication of the types of organizations that might be funded through this support to vulnerable populations grant.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll take the answer to that. And the EOC group, with the assistance of recreation staff, are doing the outreach to vulnerable groups that we know may have needs or otherwise, to undertake an assessment as to where those needs are, as opposed to it being a public application process. They have in hand a number of proposals that will probably be considered with advanced information from those groups by the policy group in mid-February.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? So we are on receipt.
Oh, sorry, Chair, I think I had my hand up.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Thanks to Howie and to Kevin for the budget presentation too. This is more of a general sort of statement. I fully support the increase for the EOC service. I think if any year was to test the service, 2020 was it. And I think going forward, we're just going to need to have to strengthen this service even more. My question was more on this whole idea of two separate functions, 270 and 271. I'm wondering, I don't know what happened in the past. I guess I hope this isn't an anomaly that, you know, the electoral areas and I think the municipal councillors on the board, I think we get along pretty well. And I'm just wondering why the need to keep the two separate functions. Are there really two separate ways of moving forward on budget items? Would it make sense to combine these two functions, or is there something I'm missing that it helps to keep the two functions separate?
Howie and Kevin might be able to allude to the past and where we have come to and why the two exist. But let me speak to our vision of the future, and that is this is a very good time with the contracts coming up for renewal to have the conversation with the municipalities as to whether this becomes a regional service and a single service with full participation of our regional partners. So it's in the very early stages of discussing this with the CAOs and the respective staff members to bring this forward for the consideration of the various policy members, the councils and board this year. So it is our vision to roll this into a single service with the participation of all, as opposed to providing it under contract. There's pluses and minuses to that, and we'll work our way through that. And Howie, do you have anything more to add to that?
No, I appreciate that input there, Russell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like staff are on top of it.
And seeing no further questions, we are still on receipt and it is still a vote of just the areas at this point. Is there anyone opposed? And seeing none, that's carried, and we're on to the recommendation.
Move one.
2,
Hamir and Grieve, and the recommendation was, as Howie had reported earlier, consideration of the 3 readings and the increase to the maximum requisition of 25%. Any further discussion? And it's a vote of the areas. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we are on to recommendation 2.
Move 2.
Hamir and Hillian, thank you. And this is to approve the financial plan and a vote of the areas. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. We're on to item 8, which is the financial plan for the 9/11 service.
Move receipt.
second.
Cole, Hamilton, and Grieve, thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much. And we'll start this discussion with Kevin Duell for providing a presentation with respect to the service and the budget for it.
Thank you very much once again through the chair to the director. So yes, I'll be presenting the financial plan, proposed financial plan for 275, our 911 answering service. So as you may recall, the 911 answering service was established back in 1993 to provide obviously 911 emergency telephone service. This particular service from a CVRD perspective is funded almost exclusively by tax requisition. And for 2021, the proposed rate currently is just over 4 cents per thousand, or roughly $20.50 per property assessed at 500,000. Currently, all the participants that pay into the service are the 3 member municipalities, along with the 3 electoral areas. Now, largely the operations that go to support 911 service in the Comox Valley and throughout the North Island is undertaken or governed by the North Island 911 Corporation. As you may recall, that corporation is a private independent corporation wholly owned by the shareholder regional districts. When 911 Corp was established back in 1995, that originally consisted of the then Comox Strathcona Regional District as a shareholder, along with the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District and a portion of the Regional District in Nanaimo, otherwise known as the School District 69 portion thereof. Mount Waddington was also an introductory shareholder in the service as well. A number of years later, about 1999, the Powell River Regional District, or Catet as it's now called, also became a shareholder within this service. In addition to that, so subsequently, many years later, in late 2017, 911 entered into its first contractual arrangement for the provision of fire dispatch service, and that is with the Peace River Regional District. And so far, that's proven to be a very successful venture for North Island 911, and we received nothing but positive feedback from Peace River on the services that they're receiving through that entity so far. The tax requisition currently in this service is apportioned out to each regional district shareholder based on the 2020 revised role assessments. Now, as indicated in the report that's in front of you today, 911 has been undertaking quite an extensive and comprehensive review of its apportionment framework, which is largely driven or contained within the shareholders agreement signed off by the member regional districts. At this point, the board has decided on an alternative model. That model being discussed at this point is a bit of a modification. Right now, we'd be looking at a 50% population and 50% assessment model to apportion out the costs for 911 out to the member regional districts. That's similar, as you may recall, to the Vancouver Island Regional Library District model, who apportions their costs out to their participating members in a similar fashion. There is a bit of a process yet to go to undertake formal approval of that. And at this point, North Island 911 is going to be considering that on an interim basis for the next 2 to 3 years, and then be kind of revisiting and reevaluating at that point. With the implementation of that model going forward, that would then result to some changes to the requisition for the Cowichan Valley Regional District. At this point, we're anticipating with those proposed changes and also with the inclusion this year of some initial revenues stemming from a second fire dispatch agreement that has just recently been signed with the Cowichan Valley Regional District. We are expecting to see about a $63,000 reduction in the requisitions required from the Comox Valley. To give you a sense of kind of where that is currently, the proposed budget that is in front of you today, we were looking at about $860,000. With the addition of the Cowichan contract, that was being already reduced further. And then with the change in the requisition apportionment, we'd be looking at about a $797,000 threshold. So to give you a sense of, kind of what the cost implications of that be, as I mentioned to you previously, at this point, the estimated residential tax rate is just over 4 cents per thousand, or roughly about $20.50 per resident at $500,000 assessed value. With that adjusted rate, you'd be looking at 0.38 cents per thousand, or that would equate to a $500,000 home of about $19.01. There's all sorts of more information also available on North Island 911 available on their website, and I've provided the link in the presentation. So again, just quickly to give you a sense of the proposed budget, and as I've already stated, the operating costs for this are already being adjusted, and we'll be reflecting that in the recommended budget as we going forward. But in essence, this gives you, kind of a snapshot to say the largest share of the costs associated with our particular service here is the operational grant that's provided to North Island 911. Other than that, we have a small contribution to reserve and some modest support service costs. The Comox Valley Regional District does receive an annual administration fee from North Island 911, as a number of senior staff are available to support the ongoing administration and workings of North Island 911. That does hit our general admin function. And for 2021, we're continue to be at $151,000 for that. So as I've noted, pretty extensive comprehensive review of cost apportionment, began in 2017. I've spoken to the regional endorsement of that potential change that may be coming forward. The plan is to enact that starting in 2021. And as I said, look to at least a 2-year window to implement that on an interim basis, and then review and consider that for a longer term. Commencing in 2021. So we are expecting mid-2021 that will also be engaging in the fire dispatch service with the Cowichan Valley. The resulting positive impacts, as that I've mentioned already, would be reflected in our recommended financial plan when that's developed. And I'll leave it at that for the budget portion of the presentation, and certainly welcome any questions.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I'd like to give the board's representative on the 9/11 Commission, Director Swift, an opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Kevin, for your report. I really appreciated the summary of the 911 service because we haven't done much communication with the board in the past, and we've been largely waiting for the results of Cowichan and also whether the regional district of Nanaimo was going to remain. Having said that, and by the way, we're very pleased about those prospects. But having said that, we did have our discussion about apportionment in our last meeting 2 weeks ago. And the staff had given us 8 options originally to consider, and we had whittled it down to 3 options. And of the 2 options that were, 2 of the 3 options that were left included call volume as one of the portions of the apportionment. And so in the interest of equity and fairness, I was really wanting us to go with one of those options. And because currently what we're doing is we're paying about 31% and receiving about 20% of the service. So it's really lopsided. Now to change it from assessment and population, it, as we've heard, doesn't change it a whole lot. So it's kind of a change without a difference for us. And so I'm really having a hard time embracing those options. In the interest of equity and fairness, I really wanted us to go with call volume as at least part of the service. I feel like the problem is it's a corporation, slightly different situation than at our board. And in order to make an apportionment change, we need to have unanimous support. And so with the assessment and population option that was put forward last meeting, the vote was 5-1. So, I don't think I can convince the other 5 people to go with the call volume as part of the formula. So I'm just wondering if any of you have any thoughts on that. And if I remain firm and it's not unanimous, it does create problems at the corporation level going forward. So I'm just wondering if anybody has any wisdom they would like to share with me regarding this.
I do see Director Grant has his hand up. Director Grant? Are you there, Director Grant?
Sorry, is that better?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. That was going to be my question, was why call volume wasn't a part of this, appropriate or apportionment that we're doing. I guess my question then goes to Kevin, is if there is no resolution on this, what happens to this requisition? Does it stay the same, or where does it go from here? Because I think call volume should be a part of it personally, but that was my question. What happens if it stays a stalemate?
It's Russell here. I'll answer your questions, but I think if you want staff advice, I would propose that you ask Mariah or James for advice, but I'll help you to answer questions. And I'm a little conflicted here, right? Because I have the dual role of your CAO, and also I'm the secretary of the North Island 911, so I have to think of that organization too. To answer your question, if there is not unanimous consent on a way to amend the apportionment, all 6 members agreeing, then no change will take place.
All right, thank you.
Mariah, would you like to add to that?
Thank you. Through the chair, I will just speak to the options that were considered. As Dr. Swift mentioned, we did have 8 options reviewed at the November meeting. So sort of a general allocation on the total cost of 911. And then we also added 4 options for the board to consider, which really looked at the core components of the service, which is the ECOM 911 contract, the fire dispatch contract, and the significant infrastructure invested in the corporation administration costs. And that's what we really started to fine tune call volume and allocation. And really what a staff we sort of considered is that has a piece to play in service levels. So the different fire departments within each of the regional districts and local fire halls essentially determine what the response level is for dispatched incidents. So we have some shareholders who have quite high levels of service. And so that's where we consider that might be a good apportionment model to consider. So the ECOM contract and the fire dispatch contract would be based on call volume, which also our fixed cost contracts are based on a total maximum call volume. So it was also a consideration of what capacity in the system was, and those high volume users kind of use up that capacity. So that was a consideration. And then the infrastructure costs and the administration would be more based on the old model, which was assessments or 50% assessment, 50% population. So the board did consider, which we sort of laid out as option 5 and 7, which was really breaking down those components and allocations. However, I think because of the layers of call volume, which we've learned a lot about call volume over the last few months here, is that because it's quite complicated, whether those are dispatch calls for fire incidents, which can average sort of 4 to 6 hours, versus sort of those calls that come in, the dispatchers check to see what the response levels are, and they might say, no, sorry, that fire department doesn't respond to that type of call, or they're just passing on calls to BC ambulance and things like that could be less than a minute. So there's quite a few layers of call volume. So I do think there's some uncertainty with the board about kind of what is the appropriate method if we were to consider call volume. And so I think, through the board's discussion is option 3 is making some movement to kind of meet those kind of concerns about fair apportionment. That's a model that's known kind of based on the library model, which is 50% population assessments. And then essentially there was a thought that, let's give it 3 years. And then through that time also we can really fine tune what the call volume layers are and what's appropriate if we do consider an apportionment method. So I wouldn't say that option 5 and 7 are closed and not up for consideration, but sort of this is a sort of a moderated approach to kind of get us there and do a bit more work.
Great. That was a wonderful explanation. Thank you. Is there any further questions? And Director Swift, do you feel like you have some direction out of that explanation?
Well, yeah, I mean, we did have a discussion around that at the board that day. And I guess I have no hope of convincing the others. So, I guess it's a move towards a different apportionment model, but I'm very disappointed regarding the call volume not being part of it. It just makes perfect sense to me to have that as part of the formula. But the board did commit to reviewing it again in 3 years. They didn't want to be part of an election cycle, and new people coming on would have a year to have an understanding of the service. So I guess we'll see. We're meeting again, I believe, February 19th. So it'll be confirmed at that time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Hillian?
Thanks, Chair. And I didn't want to leave Director Swift thinking that none of us cared about this. Just want to appreciate her efforts and also the dilemma. I did have a question as well, though, given that we provide the administrative services for this, does the charge or the cost, the revenue that comes back to this regional district, is it implicated by this discussion at all?
Through the chair to Director Hillian, you know, we have a set administration fee that's charged over from CVRD over to 911. That fee has been flat since 2012, I believe. And, you know, it's something we have considered looking at. You know, there's lots of activity happening in 911 right now through apportionment review, the Cowichan Valley contract coming on, looking with Peace River. There's lots of moving parts. But it also does fluctuate. We have kind of sleepier years with 911. This is a bit of a peak year. So it was something that we did sort of consider. I don't know if Russell, you want to speak to the IT kind of conversation, how that played into that?
Yep, this North Island 911 has had a need to increase its complement of technical staff to support the maintenance and expansion of the technical end of things. We've had one full-time staff member that is designated to North Island 911 to that extent. The plan was that we were going to create a position at the regional district that would be half-time North Island 911 and half-time providing support to some contract services. Those contract services fell through, and so we were stuck with just a half-time position. We put it to the North Island 911 board that because we're a year behind, because we're taking on Cowichan, there is a need for a full-time position, and they agreed to take on that full-time position. We will be able to use that full-time position working for North Island 911 to free up some of Brian Pearson's time and effort, which will be a benefit to the CVRD. So that's how we manage that in terms of what we're providing to the service and making sure we get good return for it, at least for the short term. But as Mariah says, with a flat contribution and admin fees of $132,000, it will be worth the reflection, especially if we continue to do this value-added strategic planning work, evaluating apportionment options on a regular basis, because it is very time-consuming.
Well, thanks for that, because it did strike me that if we're actually paying more than our call volume indicates we should, I would really like to think that we're getting full value back for the administrative support that we provide, which, as you indicate, has been extensive. So, thanks.
Any further questions, comments?
Chair Keller, if I could just add in, coming back to the idea of equity and fairness and some of the comments from Director Swift and Director Grant. It may be something for the board to consider over the next while, not for tonight necessarily, but to consider putting forward some sort of middle ground around looking to the call volume in that review period. And so I think as staff come back with materials, that might be an element to incorporate so that there is that call volume continues to play a role in terms of moving the apportionment further along.
Great, thank you.
And if I could just add too, that we realized over this last year that your director representative on 911 needs a staff support position to reflect on what's in the best interest of the CVRD and not always assume that North Island 911 and yours are the same. So James is that designate. We'll work with Director Swift on this and evaluate and provide support to her or any subsequent director that represents you at North Island 911 to make sure that your interests are there.
That's good to know, thank you. So we are still on receipt. And it's a vote of full board. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move it.
Second.
Grieve and Swift. And the recommendation is to approve the financial plan. Any further discussion? And is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We are on to item 9, which is the financial plan for the homelessness support service.
Move receipt.
Second.
McCollum and Cole Hamilton. Thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And the General Manager of Planning and Development, Alana Mullally, is here to present this report. And she will be supported. I see there are members of the Coalition to End Homelessness, but she will give introductions to them.
Thank you very much, Russell. Through Chair Kettler to the directors. Thank you very much, Dr. Hillian. As Russell noted, Andrea Capelli, the coordinator of the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, is on the call today, and she has a great presentation to offer you to highlight some of the work that the coalition has undertaken this year and to discuss some of the proposed changes that the coalition is working on for 2021. I will be providing you with an overview of this service, recapping some of the work that occurred in 2020 and highlighting the recommendations within the proposed 2021 financial plan. And as I said, Andrea will give you some further details. Thank you. So established in 2015, this is a little service with big impact. The service has a unique delivery model that was established to provide funding to one or more local nonprofit agencies to help address homelessness in the region. Since its inception, the service has contributed funding toward the development of 78 units and provided funding for the support services that are delivered at the Connect Warming Center in Courtenay. The board approves allocation of funding based on the recommendation of the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness and the 5-year action plan to end homelessness. Andrea will walk us through some changes to that reporting in her portion of the presentation. So in 2021, based on the formula prescribed within the service establishment bylaw, the service's maximum requisition is $278,471. And our proposed requisition is $245,000. So for a residential property assessed at $500,000, this amounts to a cost of service of $7.60. As Director Grieve has reported in the past, this is the cost of a really fancy coffee. As a comparative, the requisition in 2020 was $165,000 or $5.35 for a residential property assessed at $500,000. Thank you. So in 2020, the board approved allocation of $150,000, and that money went towards pre-construction costs of $5,000 for the Wache Friendship Center's development for Indigenous elders, $45,000 to the Comox Valley Transition Society for use to purchase a dwelling for mums and babies. That money was subsequently reallocated through a budget amendment to the Connect Warming Center and those support services specifically that are delivered there. And finally, $90,000 was allocated towards the purchase of a 3-bedroom condominium by Dawn to Dawn for a family. And $10,000 contribution towards Habitat for Humanity's Courtenay development for the construction of 2 single-family dwellings. So 2020 marked the 5th year of this service, and in accordance with the service establishment bylaw, a service review was undertaken. As you know, we retained consulting assistants to assist with the review, and a fulsome consultation was undertaken with the Comox Valley Coalition's leadership team and the participant staff at the City of Courtenay, Village of Cumberland, and here at the CVRD. We presented the review to you in January, and the proposed budget in front of you tonight includes 2 recommendations that emerged through the review. And in 2021, we will work with the leadership team and the coordinator and staff at Courtenay and Cumberland to identify opportunities for implementation of more of the review's recommendations in order to ensure that we are being strategic, transparent, and building the sustainability of this service.
So as you know, in 2020, under the RGS service, we completed a regional housing needs assessment. And right now we are undertaking a regional poverty, poverty assessment and reduction strategy. So these are really important inputs to this service, and specifically will assist the coalition and yourselves with evidence-based decision making, and as well as identifying some clear gaps in the supply of housing and supports in our region. Andrea will speak a little bit further to the housing needs assessment in her presentation. So it's pretty difficult to reflect on the accomplishments of 2020 without the context of the global pandemic. And the pandemic has shone a light on the acute need for safe and affordable housing and supports for those experiencing and or at risk of homelessness in our community. This service and the recommendations presented to you tonight are aligned with your direction to support vulnerable residents in our renewal efforts. So the proposed requisition for this service in 2021 is $245,000. And we're proposing to break that down between supports and projects. I'll talk a little bit more about the supports piece in a moment, but on the project side, these projects have been recommended by the coalition's leadership team. $100,000 towards Tall Tree Place. This is the development of 22 modular units in Cumberland for families, and that is a partnership between Dawn to Dawn and the Transition Society. $70,000 towards a studio and 1-bedroom development with some supports for Indigenous elders on the Wache Friendship site. And you'll remember in 2020, you provided some pre-construction costs for that project, and here it is coming to fruition. And $30,000 towards construction of a townhouse at Habitat for Humanity's Piercy Avenue site. Andrea will provide some further detail on these projects, but I would like to spend a little bit of time discussing the proposed $30,000 to support a coordinator position and the proposed $5,000 to support participation in the service of those individuals with living experience of homelessness. So these two items were identified in the service review as important steps and investments in enhancing this overall sustainability of the service. As you can tell from this chart in front of you, there are no personnel costs for the CVRD levied for this service. Rather, a part-time coordinator is employed by the Transition Society on behalf of the coalition. As you all well know, the coordinator is integral to the delivery model of this service, providing both strategic leadership and subject matter expertise. In 2020, the City of Courtenay provided funding to the Transition Society to assist with covering the cost of this position. So staff suggests that there is significant risk to the overall sustainability of the service model in the absence of core funding for the coordinator position. And this is a risk that has been flagged, in numerous locations, most recently in the service review. I would also like to highlight the ways in which this coordinator role and the service itself have evolved since the inception of the service. So the coordinator has become a really important resource across the community, providing advocacy, leadership, and expertise to each of the service participants in a number of ways. For example, regional planning initiatives, providing a link for bylaw compliance staff to agencies and their clients, and the important role, of course, this was just discussed a few moments ago, that the coordinator played in our EOC, giving us insight into the impact of prolonged disruption on our most vulnerable residents. The proposed financial plan therefore includes $30,000 as a strategic investment for coordinator funding. And staff recommends that the coordinator continue as an employee of the Transition Society. We're also proposing that $5,000 be made available to the coalition's leadership team to provide honoraria to residents with living experience of homelessness in order to participate in the planning and decision-making processes within this service. And the intent of the honoraria is to reduce barriers to participation and remunerate folks for sharing their personal experience in order to enrich the process and the decision-making within the service. As you all likely well know, provision of honoraria is increasingly becoming best practice within this region and right across the province. So these two items, as well as the provision of additional funding for projects, amounts to an increase in the 2021 budget over 2020, as shown in the table in front of you. We suggest, however, that this investment is prudent and represents good value as part of the larger project of building a resilient and inclusive community. I'd be happy to respond to any specific questions on this proposed budget before turning the presentation over to Andrea.
Okay, are there any questions? Can you scroll to the top? Okay, Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alana, for the presentation. I'd just like to voice support for this. I know that it's a departure, but as I believe I stated at the last meeting, without the role of the coordinator, the coalition and the service just is nowhere near as effective, and we've all seen the results. So I sincerely hope that the board will get behind this in a big way. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And Director Morin.
Sorry, I was clicking my button and wasn't working there. I know this is probably preemptive comment or question. Something that came to mind recently, well, it's on our minds quite a bit in Comox, but I know it's impacting the larger area and regional district and Cumberland, et cetera, in terms of encampments. And I know that some of the conservation groups or the conservation partnership is looking at maybe doing some partnering with the coalition around that. And it may be preemptive, but I don't know if Andrea or someone could answer the question whether that's something that would require some resources going forward, because that is a fairly unique situation around our unhoused folks, and has along with it a workload in terms of coordination and resources. So is that something that you can answer at this point, or is this too premature?
Through Chair Kettler to Director Morin, thank you for the question. I think I'll let Andrea weigh in on that one. I'm not familiar with that partnership that's in discussion, but certainly this would be the opportunity to talk about whether this is the appropriate budget for that funding.
Andrea,
Thank you. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, no, I haven't actually heard from any of the local conservation groups about this endeavor as of yet. Of course, the coalition is always willing and happy to partner with other organizations. I think when it comes to encampments, and since I don't really know what the plan is, absolutely, there's resources that are needed. That's always going to be the thing that's needed. If folks are in encampments, we need a place for people to go. So that's the number one thing. And definitely there's a lot of coordination that comes down to outreach and housing folks in encampments, whether that's outreach workers from agency or coordination through myself through our homelessness response team. So yes, short answer is yes.
Great. So Chair, if I could maybe direct the question to staff. I know we're in the early stages of the budget here, but is that something that could be, entertained down the road a little bit before the final approval, if that was something that needed to be added in for this service?
So you're asking if there should be an increase to the budget to support the partnership between conservation and
yeah, I mean, it sounds like this idea, which is based on a fairly successful model in Campbell River, I believe, or there is a pilot project, and it sounds like it's just not quite hot off the press yet. But if there was something that was to come up that would support this service and require some further resources, which would benefit the entire Comox Valley and obviously the citizens that are directly impacted, would that be something that we could entertain a little bit down the road in the budget process, as long as it was prior to the deadline? Or would that be better served as coming out of another pot of money? It just seems like that would be the most this would be the most logical place, but.
Madam Chair, my advice to the directors is if there is a tangible request of the regional district to consider a change to its budget or go down the road of to support a service, that the more information that can be provided either by the director proposing it or the group coming forward, the better. When it comes to this service, though, my suggestion is our focus is on the review that has been undertaken that has substantial recommendations and ideas. That's the focus for the discussion today, of advancing those which we have the ability to implement at this time. But there's going to be a lot of work for us in the coalition to consider the other recommendations with respect to that review. And that is our focus for the time being in terms of the resources that we have available and for advising us on how this service may change or advance.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. I guess this change of obviously support the work of the Homelessness Coalition, but this change of approach suggested in the budget will change how I look at the service. I think I've been happy the last 2 years to just contribute capital funds, but if we start contributing to operations, I still don't see much attention being given to the rural areas whatsoever in the work of the coalition. I don't see any projects being planned. So we're really contributing to municipalities, and every year I threw in 250 grand out of the Union Bay Estates into the pot. I don't think that the Bainstown folks who are trying to build more affordable housing in Union Bay have been part of the coalition or have been approached. Maybe there's an update from Andrea on that today. And then we have those lots that we'll probably receive through Union Bay Estates as well, tagged for affordable housing. As we build a settlement node over there, there's definitely needs, and the housing needs assessment speaks to the needs in rural areas. Director Moraine just talked about the encampments, and we have both homelessness and criminality in the rural areas that are joining hands. So all I'm saying is that if this budget moves forward, you'll probably see me a little more proactive in advocating for some of the staff time and the attention of the coalition to be spent on the rural areas to address homelessness and affordable housing issues that are specific to the rural areas. Thank you.
Andrea, would you like to respond?
I'm happy to respond to that in my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Director Hamir?
You know what? I'll wait till Andrea's presentation, then I'll make a comment then.
Okay, Andrea, are you ready to present?
I am ready to go.
All right, we're bringing up your presentation.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, just wanted to say while my presentation is being pulled up, I want to thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. I really miss being in community. 2020 has been challenging for so many reasons, but one of my favorite things to do is to be able to reach out and talk to our community members and all of our municipal leaders and our stakeholders and funders and let them know what we've been up to. So I'm just happy to be able to do so tonight. Next slide. So, and part of that is I really wanted to start by saying thank you to the regional district, to the board of directors, and to all of your staff for all of the support that you have given to the coalition over this last year. It is literally saving people's lives. From, just the HSS Year 5 funding to supporting the operation of Connect, to the restart funding, which we're using to put people up in motel rooms. It's making a significant impact in our community. And even the function of the homelessness support service, it's something that is unique, perhaps not so much to Vancouver Island anymore, but on a national scale, and it's something that we should be really proud of. So I just wanted to extend my gratitude on behalf of the leadership team and all of our member agencies. Next slide. Oh, we don't need to talk about the coalition too much. I just want to say this year also, we have seen a significant expansion of the coalition. We are now up to 31 member agencies. When I first started with the coalition 5 years ago, I believe we had 17. And we've signed on 5 agencies just this year, and I've got 2 sort of in the wings waiting to sign up. So it just goes to show that agencies themselves are seeing the benefit of being a part of the coalition, and that we can do the heavy lifting for them when it comes to advocacy and community outreach. Next slide, please. So as Alana alluded to, this year, we have a new way of reporting out on the work that we are doing and the work that we have done as a coalition. In the past, we have had a 70 to 80 page document that I'm always shocked if anyone says they read it, outlining what we've done and what we are wanting to do for the next 5 years. And what we've realized is that it is not easy to digest all of that information, and more so in the non-market and affordable housing world, things change so quickly. And it's also incredibly hard to really pinpoint and say, we're going to build such and such housing in 5 years, when we just don't know what funding is going to be available or what, the climate is going to be like. Things change rapidly. So we have split our 5-year plan into 3 separate reports. Number 1 being our housing plan. And our housing plan is really identifying our strategic priority number 1, which is to create additional housing and supports. And this is the piece that we are linked in with the regional district on through the HSS service. So in this report, we've got information on all of the housing that's been built since the inception of the service. We've got statistics from our homeless count. We've got an outline of the housing needs assessment and how we're incorporating that into our plan. And just any of those details that are really housing focused. So that report, I think, is now 20 pages long. So we feel better about that. And I believe that that was included in your agenda package. So feel free to take a look if you have time. And then we also created an annual report. This annual report is really focused on our strategic priorities 2 to 4. So community collaboration, homelessness prevention and education, internal capacity building, and funding and fundraising. And so that annual report really outlines some of our, core programs that the coalition, does have, including the Connects Warming Center, as well as our homelessness response team. And just any of that community work that we're doing, community engagement, any media, anything like that is included in that report. And then finally, we have the action plan. So we've split out our priorities to be the ones that are really focused on the capacity building and organizational building of the coalition itself. Those were in the 5-year plan before, but really it was about, how are we as an organization going to do the things we need to do outside of the homelessness supports service. So we have this new plan. We actually are up for a terms of reference update, which we're working on right now. And I have to say the timing could not have been better with the HSS bylaw service review, because a lot of those recommendations are what we're discussing as a whole when we review our terms of reference. And we've just started doing some work right now on people with lived experience advisory circle, and we're doing a bit of an environment scan and looking at best practices of other organizations and how they've incorporated this. And as well, we're looking at ways of functioning in terms of, you know, who can be a part of the leadership team and how we have equity in the work that we do. So we're really focusing on the nothing about us without us motto, and relying on a lot of the feedback and expertise of people with lived experience. So that's the new reports. The action plan will hopefully be all wrapped up by the end of spring, I'm hoping, and I'll obviously be sending that out once we have that completed. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go over all of this, but I just really wanted to touch on the fact that the housing needs assessment was such a valuable document, a valuable partnership experience, a learning opportunity for the coalition. And we are really using a lot of the findings from the housing needs assessment in terms of our advocacy and what we communicate out. Really the biggest thing for us is that, you know, obviously the private housing market isn't enough and we need non-market housing. And so one of the great things about this assessment also is we were able to identify, you know, some of the gaps in housing needs in our community, and we have now incorporated those gaps into our planning, into our housing plan. So you'll start to see this year and going forward, you know, just from these reviews and assessments that we're incorporating that work into what we're doing. Next slide, please. One of the great takeaways that we had from the housing needs assessment was the housing wheelhouse, which was developed by the city of Kelowna. And we really love this wheelhouse as that representation that housing is holistic, that it's not the continuum, you know, that we were thinking before, that depending on where you are in your life, your housing needs will change, and home ownership isn't always like the mecca that everyone wants or can achieve, and that's okay. But it does really shows through that circle sort of where the gaps are and what we need to boost up. So I took that wheelhouse from the city of Kelowna and then put in our regional inventory, so we can update that every year. Next slide, please. And then moving into the HSS bylaw service review, again, another really amazing partnership and way for the coalition to do some reflection on the way that we operate. We have grown so much over the last 5 years. It's unbelievable. And, you know, just thinking of ways that we can really solidify the work that we do and grow the impact that we have. I loved learning from Cassandra about the funds and the leveraging that occurs through the HSS. I think that that's a really, really strong statement to the power of this service. And it's something that really, you know, when we take this to the province, who has really stepped up over the last few years, they can look at this and really see we have a strong model. And also, you know, it's through the province, they're always looking at, you know, what the partnerships are at the municipal level and how strong the support is for activities related to housing and homelessness. So this is really, really strong for us, and yeah, really appreciative of that. Just quickly, I'm going to touch on some of the recommendations that came through from the coalition's perspective of what we are ready and ready to work on through our terms of reference. So the first one was around this homelessness needs assessment. And the way that we sort of discussed and framed that is we do currently have a lot of data about needs in our community. Certainly there are some gaps. But what we really need is, to get together all the different agencies and talk about what a coordinated access system and leading into a by name list could look like for our community, and pursuing funding opportunities to make that a reality, because we do think that that's something that would be really beneficial for our community. The other pieces that we had are obviously the recommendation to increase pre-development costs on our end, $10,000. We really appreciated that recommendation, as well as setting up more formal evaluation and scoring rubrics around folks' applications for the HSS funds, and developing a evaluation committee that's not made up of the leadership team members. So we are, really looking at ways that we can improve those functions. And again, it's really after result of all the growth that we've had and just the changing nature of our organization. And then, as I touched on earlier too, a lot of interest and focus and research on people with lived expertise having an advisory and a voice within the coalition. Next slide, please. So I won't go into too many details about Connects. Again, thanking you for the support for the operation of Connect this year. I do want to reiterate, and I think it is a symptom of 2020 being a wild, busy year, that Connect isn't just a drop-in center where people go to get a cup of coffee. When folks come to Connect, they are connected to housing outreach workers. So they are filling out income support forms. They are taking their VATs, getting on the supportive housing wait list, being connected into available motel rooms if that's happening. It's not just simply about a social or a warm-up opportunity. That's definitely part of it. But it really is offering housing supports. And we feel that at this point, when we don't have housing to offer to everyone, then at bare minimum, we should have a space available for people to get connected and the supports that they need. And it was without this space during the pandemic, I don't even know. I think the timing, we opened January 16th. I don't want to think about what things would have been like without this space. It was, really imperative to people's survival. So thank you for supporting that. Next slide. I won't go into this. We can just skip over that. The homeless count, I think everyone's aware that homelessness is on the rise. We've had a 13% increase there. And then here's just a small snapshot of some of the initiatives we have worked on through 2020, on top of our other functions that we have as a coalition, including the HSS recommendations. So it's been an incredibly busy year, and our agencies have just pivoted and done everything that they can to support the people in our community that need it the most. And again, that's thanks to the support from you. Next slide. And I just, Alana's already talked about all of this, so I'm not going to go into it, but I did just want to mention, tying back into the housing needs assessment, my little pictures at the bottom there. We are identifying, which gap in the housing needs assessment our housing proposals are filling. So for Tall Tree Place, that's families. For Wache, that's elders. Habitat for Families, and all equity seeking groups. So people who are low income, on disability, experiencing any number of vulnerabilities. Next slide. And I just wanted to just say very quickly, we do have a pretty thorough process about the way we come to decisions at the coalition. We do operate by consensus decision making, so we don't move forward unless we have, the majority of people on board, and we do have really robust discussions about, where the money's going and why. And I believe that's all I have for now. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, and thanks.
Thank you. And Director Hamir, you have that question that you've been waiting on?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you to Andrea for your great presentation too. Part of my comments, I think, are maybe going to be in response to Director Arbor's comments as well, plus your presentations and that of Alana's. So first of all, I just want to thank you and the coalition for all of the fantastic work you're doing in the community. I don't think even 5 years ago we could have thought that, where we would be today. So kudos to everybody who is working together and looking at this so strategically. I'm always so impressed at how well the group is working together, and you really are a model, I think, for the rest, not just for the rest of the province, the rest of the country, really, of how a small communities like ours can come together. With Director Arbor's comment about homelessness in rural areas, my first reaction was, well, from my understanding of the needs of the community that are either unhoused or, are facing that predicament, that the ability to be close to services like the food bank, the hospital, because I noticed that in the point of time count that those were the services that were most needed, that it really benefits to have this housing close to some kind of municipal center. But I'm just hoping that that's not just an assumption. And maybe, Andrea, if you could comment about what role the rural areas could play in this function, because for now I see the tie-in with all of the nonprofit groups that own land close to urban centers and can provide that as as a place for building to occur, but also where they are centered as well, like close to their clientele. And if you see or if maybe in the housing needs assessment where that overlap with housing, maybe it's more on the affordable housing side than rather the housing for the unhoused. Yeah, would you mind going into that a bit more?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks. I said I would touch on that in my presentation and I did not. So thank you. Yeah, to be sure, there are many homeless people in rural areas of our community. And through our homelessness response team, which is made up of outreach workers from a cross section of agencies in the Valley, they are conducting outreach into the rural areas daily, as are mental health and substance use and other frontline agencies and island health in our community. And there are a few things. I mean, transportation is a huge issue for people. If folks can't be connected into more of the urban centers where the services are, things get really challenging. And that's why we do have outreach go out to help people with what they need, because they simply don't have the availability to get where they need to go. And I do think that there is a piece about being open and obviously very willing to partner with any of the areas who are interested in building affordable housing. And I often think about seniors who may be sort of aging in need of, I just think there are a lot of opportunities, and I encourage anyone who's concerned to reach out to myself. We are always looking for new organizations to partner with. So if that's Black Creek or Bain Sound or Hornby or Denman, we are absolutely open to that. It's affecting it. The effect is felt everywhere. Absolutely.
Chair, could I have a subsequent question then?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this would probably be to staff, to Alana. I'm wondering if staff would have time, because I know like the RGS service is up next and I saw what's on your plate, but since our housing needs assessment's been done, will we be seeing any kind of analysis around like this topic specifically, what can be done in the rural areas, whether it be bylaw changes or just changes to zoning to allow for affordable housing. Will that be coming up sometime this year?
Through Chair Kettler to Director Hamir, thank you for the question. As you were speaking, Director Hamir, I was thinking about one of our projects that is on that RGS list, which is our poverty reduction assessment, the poverty assessment and reduction strategy. And I think we're going to get even more information about the nuances of what poverty looks like and the needs in rural areas. So I think that's an area where you can see some recommendations arising, some tangible actions that could be taken, whether it's just in the rural areas or right across the board. As far as bylaw changes, we've spoken at the Electoral Area Services Committee about work within our electoral area planning function around this issue of tiny homes. What on earth are tiny homes and what are the barriers? And so that's some work that we're hoping to do with our community. I've said this at this table before, the rural zoning bylaw is very permissive, and I would suggest really does, set the stage or set those conditions for affordable housing. And specifically what I'm referring to is that ability to add a second unit with no minimum size to almost every residential parcel in the rural areas, save and except, of course, in the ALR. So that is one really important policy piece that's embedded within the zoning bylaw. There has been discussion, of course, around this table and at the council tables around recreational vehicles, and we're going to come back to you a little bit more with that. So I think there are some things in the works that come out of implementing the housing needs assessment and then out of the poverty reduction work. And then certainly the service review that we've talked about, we'll be doing a lot of work with the coalition and with Andrea this year to figure out how we can improve delivery, how we can address some of these really wicked problems. Thank you.
Well, thanks to both of you.
Thank you. And I think because of the review, I feel like it's good to reflect on how far we've come. And Andrea did mention it in her presentation, but when I was elected in 2014, there was no coalition and there was no support service. And I think the nonprofits were having a really hard time coordinating. We weren't getting investment from the province. Housing wasn't being built. And there wasn't much of a relationship between local governments and those nonprofit service providers. So much has happened over the last 5 years, and it's quite remarkable how the coalition has developed and all the housing that's been built. And those relationships, and thank goodness we had those relationships when COVID hit, because we could rely on each other and especially, Andrea with as the coordinator, participating in the Regional Emergency Operations Center, and just all the efforts of the people on the ground, the service providers, was just quite remarkable. So I think we have a lot to be thankful for, and it's just been amazing to watch this organization grow. So thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, everyone.
Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I chime in with all the accolades for Andrea and the group. But just not to be the harbinger of bad news, but I think we're only beginning this journey. Thank you.
Yes, there's still lots of work to be done, absolutely, but good to celebrate accomplishments as well. So we're still on receipt, and it's a vote of the areas and Courtney and Cumberland. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and there's a recommendation. Okay, Director Hillian.
Second.
Director Hamir, thank you. And that's the recommendation that the annual report be received. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried, and there's recommendation 2.
Move 2.
Second.
Amir and Moran, thank you. And that's at Comox Valley Coalition and Homelessness 2021 Housing Plan, including the allocations from the financial plan listed below. Be approved. Again, this is a vote of the areas and Courtney and Cumberland. Any further comments or questions? And is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. We're on to item 10.
Chair, could I ask for a break before we go into the RGS?
Sure. So we're at 5:55, so we'll come back at 6 o'clock. Oh, and we have dinner in the boardroom. So maybe we'll take an extra 5 minutes, so 6:05.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you then.
He's in middle school, you know. He said, well, I said, you know, all those, you know, how many Austrians were famous rally drivers? I said, not one of them was named Wolfgang either.
Thank you. Okay, can we have everyone back? Hope you had a nice little break. A bite to eat. And where did we leave off at item 10, the 2021-2025 financial plan for the Regional Growth Strategy Service? Director Hillian.
Second.
Director Hamir, thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Alana Mullally will present the RGS budget and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell. Through Chair Kettler to the directors. Thank you. I'm here to present the Regional Growth Strategy proposed financial plan for 2021 through 2025. The Regional Growth Strategy is our key regional service to guide regional planning and decision-making. The service is focused on study work, data collection, and collaborative planning. One of the key objectives of the service is to build capacity to work together on very complex issues. That requires identifying key partners and integrating as much of the work as possible, finding ways to make the service efficient and nimble in order to respond to board priorities and emerging trends. In 2019 and again in 2020, the board opted to begin investing in this service in order to better use it to its full potential. This was a strategic move premised on fiscal responsibility, for example, not relying on reserves for day-to-day operations, and on opportunities for efficiency through collaboration. In 2020, we did see some COVID-related delays that required pivot. However, overall, we had a successful year in completing some significant projects, planting some important seeds, and launching a number of initiatives. As we just discussed in respect to the homelessness and support service, the regional housing needs assessment was completed. This is an important tool that will require update every 5 years. And in the interim, that is a tool that we'll use, and we'll keep coming back to the findings at this table. You'll find your staff coming to you with recommendations from that work at council tables and in the electoral areas. Every time you consider development approvals or development applications that affect housing. And as we heard from Andrea Capelli, nonprofit agencies in our community are already using that needs assessment to leverage, to identify gaps, but also to leverage in funding applications. We also initiated the poverty reduction strategy. So we were able to retain a consultant, build a project advisory team, which includes representatives from the coalition, the Community Health Network, the Social Planning Society, Village of Cumberland, Courtney, Comox First Nation, and CVRD staff. And as you will recall, that project is 90% grant funded. We also launched our active transportation network planning process. We established a project advisory team, which includes municipal and CVRD staff, as well as School District 71, BC Transit, and Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure staff. We established a larging working group, which includes representation from the Island Corridor Foundation, the Valleywide, the District Parent Advisory Committee through the school district, the Social Planning Society, the Cycling Coalition, North Island College staff, and others. And we secured a significant amount of grant funding to complete that work. We had our first virtual open house last night. It went swimmingly. We had a lot of great feedback, and we have another open house scheduled for Thursday afternoon. We've also been working in 2020 and continuing through this year on the development of a hub site. So this is a response to your direction to create a sustainability checklist, as well as a response to our requirement to monitor progress on our regional growth strategy. And so what we're looking to do is to provide that digital dashboard that will become an open data source for our community. We're really keen to use this platform in 2021 to help coordinate reporting among the municipalities and the regional district. For example, development statistics, community greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, and to make all of that data available to our community. In 2020, we also saw the completion of our Transition 2050 Residential Retrofit Acceleration Strategy. We're just calling that the T2050 strategy. You'll recall that that is the assessment of energy use in our community And it identifies a number of key actions that we can take to reduce GHG emissions. And so today we hosted, in partnership with the Regional District of Nanaimo, a webinar. We had over 80 attendants, most of whom attended from communities within the region, learning about heat pumps and other efficiencies that they can make, or changes, pardon me, that they can make in their homes to improve their overall energy efficiency. In 2020, we also had a fully subscribed wood smoke reduction program. And this was despite not being able to execute a number of the in-person engagements that we had planned. And we've adjusted our 2021 program accordingly. We also contracted some assistance to start tracking community GHG emissions. And I'll talk about this a little bit further in the 2021 work plan discussion. Certainly, if 2020 has taught us anything, it is that with collaboration, we can make great strides towards implementing a shared vision. So with that in mind, I'd like to present the proposal for the 2021-25 financial plan. Revenue within the service is derived primarily from tax requisition. In order to tackle some of the complex issues that have emerged through strategic planning, in 2021, requisition is proposed at $550,000 versus $405,000 in 2020. So based on an estimated residential tax rate of 0.0277 cents per 1,000 of taxable assessed value, a residential property assessed at $500,000 will have a tax impact in 2021 of $13.85 versus $10.65 in 2020. In 2021, revenue is supplemented with provincial grants amounting to $294,000. Yes, you heard me right, almost $300,000 in grant funding. So we continue to keep abreast of additional grant funding to support this work. On the other side of that, we do need some help to accomplish these tasks. So we are proposing to increase the full-time equivalency in this service from 1.97 FTE to 2.75 FTE. This is suggested to be accomplished through allocating some existing positions within the organization, as well as our proposal to hire a planning and policy analyst for the RGS. We regard this as a necessary and prudent hire in order to ensure implementation of all of the planning and study work that's underway. This continues to be a lean service with big output. The service does not have any capital reserve funds. By the end of this financial reporting period, the reserve balance is anticipated to grow modestly to just over $56,000. On the operations side, we are proposing an increase of $94,340, which is primarily related to the need for additional staffing support, consulting assistance, and enhanced public engagement that comes along with the programs that we'll be delivering in 2021. I'm sorry, I should have had this up as I was going through those numbers. I can come back to it if there are any specific questions on the breakdown. So our 2021 work plan projects. The staff report contains a series of detailed project plans appended to the staff report to illustrate the proposed work in 2021 and into 2022. But I'll just provide a little bit of an overview, a description, and the timing that we're looking at. As I mentioned, the regional poverty reduction strategy is underway, and we'll be wrapping that up by July. Our air quality roundtable. This, of course, is a project that emerged through strategic priorities. We are nearing completion of year one of the 3-year project and 3-year framework that the board approved. In 2021, we're launching our new wood smoke reduction program, and we reported to you last month on the details of that, and we've already had some applications. Our regional active transportation network plan, as I noted, is well underway, and we'll be wrapping that up in early spring. As for monitoring the RGS and evaluating its progress, our key tool for that is the development of our ArcGIS hub site. One of the exciting things about this is that we've gone with a product that will be compatible with all of our other ArcGIS tools and is well used throughout the valley and right across the province. So that will be a really accessible tool that will have a lot of capacity to grow. For example, if ever the board decided that you were looking for a reporting tool to meet some of the municipal needs as well. And we're hoping to launch that in early summer 2021. As I mentioned, the Transition 2050 strategy project, we reported that to you in the fall, and we've got a number of implementation items that will be coming your way. Community greenhouse gas emissions tracking. So this is a project we've engaged some consulting assistance to help us. It's just capacity that we don't have. We don't have the expertise in-house to do this one. So we've retained a community contribution company to help us with that work. And one of the things that we will be looking to, hopefully, is to be able to work with your staff in the municipal areas to collect some of the data so that we can present a regional profile of how we're doing on community emissions. We used to, as some of you will know, we used to use the CEEI, that's the Corporate Energy and Emissions Inventory. I might be getting that acronym wrong, I apologize. But that's data that was partial in its collection, and in any case, it really stopped in 2012. So since 2012, we really haven't had the province providing any community emissions data, and so we're hoping to be able to fill that gap. And also remember, the reason that we're wanting to do that is that we have some very clear targets in our sustainability strategy that are now reflected in the regional growth strategy. We need to be able to have some understanding of progress that we're making. We also have a community climate action granting program. We'll be talking to you a little bit more about this in a subsequent staff report, but this is something that arose from a direction that you gave us to look at ways to incentivize, or a program to incentivize local climate action. So we're launching it as a competition where we'll be inviting individuals and organizations within the community to submit their ideas for GHG emission reducing projects. As I say, we'll be coming back to you in a few short weeks with some details on that program. Oops. So as you know, all of this important work amounts to an at-capacity work plan. And we're looking forward to working with you and your staff and all of our community partners to make progress in each of these game-changing areas over the course of 2021. Thank you.
Great. Are there any questions? Director Hamir.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alana, again for a great presentation. I'm really enthused about the way that this service has really blossomed. I think under this board, it's probably one of the biggest impacts that this board has had on the operations of the regional district. So congrats to you and your team. I love how you've really embraced collaboration as one of the modes of getting so much work done with so few people. Just a couple of questions. I was wondering if I didn't see mention of the Food Hub grant, and if that was under this RGS line item, or if it fell under a different service, because just in terms of your staffing time, was that going to be a portion of it taken up by monitoring that contract? And second question was, in our addendum, we have a proposal going forward to ABICC and UBCM around community climate action planning. And that's kind of where I'm thinking long term, if we're doing a lot of parts around climate action as in this service particularly, but I don't think we have sat down and done an actual action plan. And is that something that staff would have the capacity to do, either in 2022, or what would be needed to in order for us to go ahead and do something like that?
Through Chair Kettler to the directors. Director Hamir, thank you for those comments and for the questions. On the Food Hub proposal, that is something that we are undertaking under the electoral area planning functions. And so that'll be some of my time, but also working with Jody McLean, our planner in rural planning, to oversee that contract and work with the consultants. On the capacity, sorry, not the capacity. See, that was a Freudian slip. On the question of community emissions and a climate action program, you're right, we don't have a coordinated regional plan around climate action. And I have said this before, I think I said it at strategic planning, and I would say it again today. I think that is a valuable tool to help us all ensure that we're swimming in the same direction or paddling in the same direction, but also to bring awareness to all of the different and currently discrete pieces of work that are happening. So for example, City of Courtenay has undertaken a significant amount of work through the OCP process. So there's lots to learn there. We're doing these projects. Cumberland and Comac staff, I understand, are also working on some initiatives. So I think there is a role for coordination. I think this is the appropriate service under which to do it. I'm not really just sure how we would deliver it to you, except to say that we have promised you on the transportation side a series of board workshops to flesh out how we want to address some of these issues on climate as well as transportation. So I think that that could be an important topic for one of those early sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. Really pleased to see this report and all the fine initiatives in it, all of which I'm happy to support. But you won't be surprised when I say that I think there is something missing. Back in July, the board received a report related to accessibility, and we did pass a resolution at that time that consideration of a regional accessibility strategy and social inclusion be included as part of the board's strategic planning. There was also a recommendation that a $15,000 grant be budgeted for to support the Social Planning Society with their work, which would include facilitating the work of the Accessibility Committee in the Valley. And this was reinforced at the strategic planning session with indications from staff that that this item would be included. So I'm not sure if it's been missed or it's still to come. So that's primarily my question just now.
To answer the director's question, it is something that, that may have fallen a little through the cracks, but before the budget is adopted, we will come back to you and present to you how that action will be implemented this year. So we will come back to you with a report with respect to that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. And if it's necessary, I'm prepared to move a resolution to that effect.
I think we've got the board's direction on that. We just need to be sure that we provide you with the means for implementing that through this budget, and we will do that for you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Any further questions? We're still on receipt. And it's the vote of the full board. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, Alana. Oh, Director Grave, did you have a question?
Well, I'm sorry I'm late on the draw, but just to let everybody know that it's been a long time in the wilderness. The regional growth strategy started off before even I got elected. And at the end of the day, it was starved for funds for so long. I'm just happy it's back. So thank you, Alana.
I agree. Thank you. Okay. Director Hillian's moving the recommendation. Director Cole-Hamilton seconded. And that's to approve the financial plan. Any further comments, questions? Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we are on to item 11, the financial plan for recreation services.
Move receipt.
Director Arbor, Director Cole-Hamilton, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Doug DeMarzo, General Manager of Community Services, is here to present the report on the Recreation Service Grant Function.
Thank you to the chair, to the directors. I'm here to present, as noted, Service 600, a recreation grant, which is contributed by all areas across the region for recreation programs provided by other agencies, primarily and nonprofits. As you look to your board strategic priorities, we look at community partnerships. The service provides grants to all municipal partners, as well as many nonprofits that are regional in nature. Also, on the climate change front, there's some programming that supports outdoor recreation and education around climate change, especially around Comox Lake. And when you think of the Rethink Comox Valley adoption, the active Comox Valley websites and free partnership activities are being updated and regularly respond to COVID-19 pandemic. So all those things are happening within this recreation grant service. 2020 and 2021, some of the work plan accomplishments and maybe not so much accomplishments was unfortunately the memorial pool was closed throughout 2020 due to COVID. And there was still some costs allotted to this service last year to cover that closure. And the board adopted an aquatic study in 2020 to be moved into and initiated in 2021. And we're hopeful that's going to continue on. Should also be noted that 30,000 is also coming from your budget to support that study. But overall, as you'll see as we move through, this supports many outdoor offerings, which is key during COVID for public health. So many of these organizations have been long-standing in the budget process. And in 2022, you can expect to see some operating agreements signed with some of these organizations to expedite the process, I suppose you could say. Of note here is you'll see the field house for 115,000, which was alluded to in earlier presentations at the Rec Commission, is a carryover from last year to help build that field house. Also new to this budget this year is the Cumberland Lake Wilderness Society. Not completely new to the budget as we did support some capital improvements last year for paddles. We'll be offering free programs out of the Comox Lake campground this year. So there's some support in there as well. One thing to note about this table as we move forward is there's an increase of 62,000 that's not reflected on this table, which is noted in your recommendation number 2. Of this, the city has requested a significant increase of about 30,000 to support the operations and capital for the memorial pool in 2021, with even further increases moving forward. Depending on COVID-19 and further discussions between the city, there is also a slight possibility of the $50,000 study could be delayed with many of the aquatic services that have not been provided in the last year. So we'll have to speak a little more closely, but those are the main contributors to the $62,000 increase. We also note another slight increase that brings the total here is about $3,500 has been set aside for one-time special events to cover any additional costs that may be permitted later in the year if these special events happen to arise. I think notably, some of this may end up as surplus depending on how COVID continues throughout the year. Should also note for the first time in a while, Vancouver Island Mountain Center has requested a grant increase of 5,000 to cover lower revenues as they're currently just hosting Mount Washington staff at reduced rates. And interestingly, their insurance rates have also risen by 16,000 this year. So all this amounts to residents having an assessed value of 500,000. With the current budget table up here, it would be $8.50 impact, with additional 61,000 to be about $10. At this point, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, Director Harbour, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and probably comments more than questions. And I want you guys to remember the first one, because the second one will be my usual song. I think, so the first one I'll speak as chair of the Sports Commission, and the second I'll speak as having taken the mantle of Director Grieve as complaining about the inequity sometimes in the services in regards to rural areas. So as the chair of the Sports Commission, I think it's funny, I missed that one last year when we were looking at going through the budget. I think COVID hit as we were considering this budget, or maybe a little before, but it has occurred to me, and I mentioned to staff the last few days, that maybe this service would have better strategic alignment if we integrated under the Sports Commission as we did with the exhibition grounds. In future plan, I think we are looking at all the recreation partnerships in the service, and it's like it's showing up tonight as a ticket, but I think it would make a lot of sense where our mind is already set on the matters of the Recreation Commission And also our conversations, you'll see that this is where the funding for Active Comox Valley actually happens and gets decided on. And it's totally outside of the conversation and budget consideration of the Sports Commission. I think the directors in the Comox Valley would be better served if all these things were aligned, or at least if we gave that consideration in the next year. So that's one comment. And the second is just again around parity. I mean, I'm just looking, and my question will be more, you know, how do these organizations get added, right? And what's our granting process and how do people access it? So you know, it's nice if you Cumberland, you contribute 18,000 and you get back about 35,000 in investment. So that's doubling your money that you're putting in. But if you're Area A, you're putting in 50,000 and you get back 8,000. And if you're Area C, you give 50,000 and you get back 25,000. And I'm sure we can make arguments that maybe we need to support people who are closer to services in the municipalities, as we heard earlier today. But you know, I think that it's still a question. And further is how do we assess that regional value, right? I get a ton of people coming from the Comox Valley to mountain bike on Hornby. So the United Riders of Cumberland get 25,000. We have the Hornby Island Mountain Biking Association, they get nilch. And so there's a parity issue about how we go about it. And obviously, if I was on the winning side, I wouldn't complain, although I would probably, because I like when it's closer to parity. But I'd love to have a look at how we attribute those dollars. And second, if it's truly going to be regional, maybe some of those items don't belong in there. Some of the things we're funding. Maybe we should just have a little strategic session around what is this regional recreation grant program, and what do we a bit like we're doing with regional parks, what would be the true criteria? Because I can tell you, even the recreation programs that get funded, the 8,000 that I do get back, I'm not sure they're of high regional value. I think they get funneled into the budget of Hornby and Denman Rec programs, which mostly support locals. So I don't think it's a regional grant in nature. So I have all these questions. This said, this is just a flag. I think change happens slow, and I'm fine with that. I'm just flagging that. I think for this year, I'm quite fine passing the budget, but I did want to pass on those comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McCollum.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff for this report. I'd say that my question / comment is very much in line with what Director Arbour just raised, that I'm unclear how these grants are accessed and whether or not we have a process that's equitable across the community. I mean, some of the organizations, some organizations seem more like outliers and other ones seem like programs that are providing, you know, direct, like with the example of the Cumberland Wilderness Society, free programming accessible to our local community, whereas other things such as the Mountain Center, it's arguable how often that's even used by our local community. So I suppose it's not that I have any objection to anything in this list. I'm more curious if we do get grant applications that we say no to, or if there's a business case presented that, I guess I would like to have a better understanding of how we come up with what we're willing to fund through this function. I think I'm frozen again.
No, we hear you. I'll just pass it over to staff to comment.
Yeah, I think it's important to somewhat understand the long-standing history here. This was really set up originally to kind of support Courtney Rec and the Memorial Pool, and over time it's more or less growing, and programs have come in over time. And one of the objectives of the grant review we undertook in August was to put this online and make it more of a formal process. So there's definitely some long-standing items in here that were regional in nature, such as the Memorial Pool and the some of the skateboard park. And those are decisions made at the time as funding sources. And this was the conduit to do it. Others have just come through time that believe their regional served regional purpose in nature. and have been added. So up until really this year, we've just recently launched our website that allows people to assess these type of grants. I think it's mostly just been through groups coming forward and understanding this process has been here and then being presented in budget presentations. So it hasn't been widely advertised. That being said, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, most of these groups are regional wide and do draw from across all the areas. And for example, UROC, it's been pointed out a couple times here, but should be noted that the majority of their work is actually on Area A and Area C lands where the majority of their trails reside. So it's just the way it's kind of established over the years, and we'll work to with our new grant webpage to, you know, further develop this.
Thanks for that answer. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's hard to take issue with any of them without knowing any of the background, but I do wonder if, you know, some organizations are more comfortable asking for more and others aren't aware of it, and just, it would be good to have reassurance that this is being used in an equitable way across the community. And obviously that's a big one to address at this juncture, but looking forward, it would be good to revisit. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? Okay, we're on receipt. Oh, Director Killian, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I think the discussion is useful, but it's also a reflection of the somewhat fragmented structure of Valley governance and how things evolve over the years. We have a lot of services here where they may not, in fact, be located, or they may be located in one particular community, but are going to provide service to the entire community. And I would venture to guess that there'll be young people and adults from all over the valley, including the islands, who will make use of the Comox United Fieldhouse, for example. And I think many of the other services that are noted here are available more widely than just in the community they serve. So I don't entirely agree with the premise that a particular area may only get back X amount based on the grants directly to organizations within it, given that many of these are services that are widely used by people throughout the communities. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Director Hillian. I don't see any further comments or questions. Oh, no, I do. Director Harbour, go ahead.
Yeah, and you have to take into consideration, sure, there is some use even from as far as Hornby, there's no doubt about it, but there's also use of Hornby from the rest of the valley is my point. And so the question as to why some things would get supported and others not, maybe it is just a problem of awareness of application, and I just need to encourage my community and nonprofits to start applying for larger amounts to the funds, and then for consideration for staff. I'm quite open to that one. I was hoping for at least one comment or feedback from any board members around the notion of asking staff to investigate the pros and cons of looking at situating this service under the auspices of the Sports Commission. If it's not resonating with anyone, I can drop it, but I personally think that would be a valuable effort to at least look at it.
Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm sure Director Arbor means the Recreation Commission, but I mean, I don't have any idea what that involves in terms of staff work or you know, reorganization of budgets and services and such. But I think it's an interesting concept, at least worthy of hearing something from staff about whether you think it's something that could be explored further or not.
On the surface, it has really little, if any, implication in terms of staff resources. But I think more staff resources are probably going to be applied to this service as we look at providing greater transparency, which has already been initiated. the awareness that it may be open to other organizations. And maybe for that purpose, it would be easier to manage it if, as Director Arbor suggests, it is in the recreation forum where recreation ideas are formulated and plans developed. And maybe it is worthy of a strategic session as to what the priorities should be before you are inundated with requests, that you set your priorities on the basis of the perspective of recreation. It's not to suggest we could accomplish that all this year, but definitely it's worth considering. And as I say, to begin with, transferring it to that service or that means of managing it would not be problematic.
Thank you. Director Grieve.
Yeah, I'm sure staff are aghast at the fact that we're haggling over number 11 here, but you know, they have to remember that this is the last and first time that we get to actually discuss these various small services that we have. So, but I think it's all point taken, and I would like to call the question on receipt. Thank you.
We have one more hand up, so we'll allow Director Hamir her question.
Thanks. It was more just a quick comment in support of Director Arbor's proposal to move this into the Recreation Commission. A lot of the questions that were asked yesterday, the budgets, for example, the field house, the soccer field house, was here, and sometimes it's hard to understand how all the moving parts work. So I would like to support that idea if staff could come back with a report and just let us know what changes would be needed or what kind of resources would be needed to do that.
So does staff need a motion for that, or? Okay. Okay, so we'll take care of receipt first. It's a vote of the full.
That's right.
It's a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. So we're on to recommendation if we want that one, or if you would like to propose.
Chair, I'll move the recommendation with the addition of requesting a staff report on the implications of moving this service to the Recreation Commission.
Second.
Second by Hamir. Any further discussion? Okay, again, vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thanks, Doug. And we're on to item 12, which is the financial plan for the Comox Valley Economic Development Service.
Move receipt.
Second.
Cole, Hamilton, and Hillian, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Mariah Fort is here to present the budget for the Economic Development Service. And we can answer any of your questions that you may have.
Great, thank you, Russell. Through the chair, today I will be overviewing the Function 550 Economic Development Service budget. There we go. This service is delivered by the Comox Valley Economic Development Society, CVRD, based on the term agreement that was established in the summer of 2021, and it goes till the end of 2022. This new agreement reduced the financial commitment of CVRD from $1.2 million to $800,000. It also provided increased reporting and communication requirements back to the CVRD board, support for the Economic Recovery Task Force through the COVID relief, and included a service review in 2021. The core service components of this service, and particularly through the CVRD's contract, is the tourist information services through the visitor center, destination marketing, economic development services, and also the new contract includes support for the Economic Recovery Task Force, as previously noted. I will sort of give an overview at a high level of the budget that is provided through the $800,000 to CVRD. So approximately $300,000 is going towards the visitor center. And that includes the new contract established with Tourism Vancouver Island for operations, as well as the ongoing operations and maintenance of that facility. Destination marketing is approximately $100,000, and $80,000 is provided by, again, that tourism anchor island contract that CVED's committed for 2021 and 2022. And then the 400,000 remaining is allocated to economic development services, which is primarily goes towards wages and benefits of the particular staff in CVEDs to provide that service. So as a budget summary of this overall service, we've proposed a 975,000 requisition. So this is a 273,000 decrease from the 2020 level of $1.248 million. This does include surplus carry forward from 2020, as we did reduce the contract partially in 2020 of $161,000. In addition to the 800,000 CVEDs contract, we also have a few other components within this budget for the board to consider, because we are going through this transition year with a new contract, as well as supporting the Economic Recovery Task Force and COVID recovery, and as well being mindful of the board's strategic planning session that they held in the fall, and what priorities were laid out, and just making sure there's enough funds available to allow some flexibility for the board to ensure their goals and deliverables can be achieved. So as noted here, we've got the contract $800,000. So overall contract management fees, the CVEDs accounting audit fees. So through discussion in the fall, as we look to the shared services liaison with working with CVEDs, we determined through the service review process that we would continue on with their existing accounting services externally provided in 2021, and we provided funding for them to support this transition time, and also to allow our team here at CVRD to assess and ascertain their accounting activities. We have allocated $80,000 into this budget proposal to support the board in providing more possible resource or consulting fees to ensure we can meet all the deliverables within the task force. So supporting all of the items noted within their report and COVID recovery. And we also have a budget for the service review that's underway. And then there's the annual contribution for the Vancouver Island North Film Commission. So that's at a high level, the budget that's before you. And I would sort of just mention is, with our lens overall, with all of our CVRD budgets this year, is that COVID recovery lens, really being mindful of the taxpayers who are going through this recovery and savings where we can. So one thing to note is, that 273,000 reduction from where we were last year does have an impact to the, participants. So to give you an idea of breakdown for the electoral areas A to C, that provides, depending on the area, sort of 30 to 45,000 savings. For the town of Comox, that's 54,000 to them, and their overall tax relief, and then the city of Courtenay 115,000. So just as we go into this budget, there is sort of a baseline with some additional funds. So we're just trying to be mindful of continuing service delivery, but there is still also quite a significant savings to the taxpayers with this proposed budget. So touching on strategic drivers. So again, with that COVID lens, we're really looking at our budgets and making sure we're sustainable in our service delivery, but also being mindful of providing that relief where we can. So the 273,000. Climate crisis is not a strategic, core driver of the service at this time. We do have a lot of community partnerships. We do have the 20,000 grant for the InFilm, as well as CVEDs has multiple partnerships and relationships as noted in their annual report, and they're working to support the Economic Task Force in their delivery of service. And lastly, Indigenous relations. They engage directly with the KFN on various economic activities, have membership on the board, and are part of the ERTF. I did just want to circle back to the board strategic priorities. So in the fall of 2020, the board took some time to really look at the service and determine what the priorities were, particularly with the COVID lens, and identified 7 priorities for the board, and sent a letter to CVEDs asking for them to incorporate this into their 2021 work plan. Those items are listed there, and within the report, the appendix includes the work plan for CVEDs, which includes, quite a few items, and I think, fall in line with most of their service levels in most years. But you can see in page 4 and 5, they have highlighted, particular items to meet these deliverables. I don't see sort of a timeline or action plan, or we're putting back to the board on sort of what the timeline might look for these in 2021, and might be something the board want to consider, but they are noted within the work plan that's attached. And then the other items was the ERTF priorities. So through that review, they've identified quite a few items, talking to the stakeholders across the community of things that could really help support recovery and just the businesses and diverse businesses across the region. So just noted here, and I did note quite a few of them are integrated into the CVRD's work plan in some fashion. But again, sort of with these two, the board priorities and the ERTF priorities, that's where that sort of additional funds are within this budget for the board to consider if maybe they want some additional support in particular service areas or deliverables or whatnot in economic development. So the budget proposed provides a bit of funding for the board to consider that. Other highlights and summaries. So as noted previously, CVRDs did go ahead and secure a contract with Tourism Vancouver Island for 21-22. This includes MRDT management, as well as operating a visitor center and doing the destination marketing activities. That budget is committed to around $258,000 per year. So that's something that's a core component within the $800,000 allocated. One of the other things CVRDs has asked for is they've determined that the siding of the visitor center needs to be refinished. So they've asked us to consider a request for up to $83,000. I think they've gotten a single quote. So, through our procurement practices, we might look to request they get 3 quotes, but just at a preliminary estimate, $83,000 to do the siding. We do have funds within the reserve of $79,000 at the end of 2020, and we have put in a contribution to reserves as in proposed, because just be mindful of that facility is likely expected to have ongoing upgrades. And just, within the contract, there is a request, a requirement for CVRDs to really consider asset management. Us as an organization in CVRDs, we're trying to make sure we maintain our infrastructure to provide service. So we've asked them to consider, asset management practices. We have talked with them about possibly, looking to doing more of a facility assessment to make sure they really holistically look at all the needs of that facility and kind of so we can plan ahead to make sure. So that was not included in their request, nor is it included in our 550 budget. So it might be something also for the board to consider, so we can really sort of see the state of that asset and start planning ahead to make sure that it's maintained. And that's it. I will pause here for any questions you may have.
Great. Are there any questions? Director Grant, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Not a question, but more of a statement. When we started this, economic development had about a $1.2 million budget. And then we started interjecting our decisions into their board. One of those decisions was to drop their budget to $800,000. Well, now we're coming back, and by my math, when you put the maintenance of the building back in, you're looking at about $330,000. That gets us almost exactly to where we were before. The problem with that is that we're now getting less service for the same amount of money. This is why I didn't want to get involved in messing with this service. I thought it was running properly, and I thought it was running pretty efficiently at the time. And through all of that, we've done nothing but make a mess of this, in my opinion. So the reason that Comox started a service review in the first place, because we could see where this was going. It's more cost for less service. And had we been able to keep on with our transition committee and work through that, I think we were working towards something that may or may not have come to conclusion, but that all blew apart and ended up not working out. I mean, I've heard comments from this board publicly where they don't have confidence in the Economic Development Service. They don't trust their abilities. And even one comment when they did a presentation that it was the worst they'd ever seen. With all the angst around this, I just don't see any way that this relationship with economic development can continue. And so I think it's time that we cut our ties with this organization, stop throwing the good money after bad. I mean, we can't even reduce a budget properly here in this. So when this report, when we're done with this report and we receive it, I would make a motion that we terminate the contract between economic development and the CVRD.
It's gonna be fun.
Okay, well, we might consider deferring that discussion, but I will let other directors speak first. Director Morin?
Thanks, Chair. Just regarding well, I have a couple questions regarding the siding on the building. I have a question about policy in terms of procurement, and I guess with this being a contract, CVEDS is able, if assuming we approve this, CVEDS is able to basically hire whoever they want. I guess I'm wondering if with these contracted services, if we have any say in terms of utilizing our procurement policies, and when we do capital projects or whatever, because I think that if we don't have that already in place, that it might be something to look at, so that who we're contracting with is supporting those equity policies and all that other stuff. So that's one question, whether they would just be on their own to hire and have that service or that work done however they'd like. And then the other question I had was around the 70,000 for the accounting, et cetera. My recollection was that we'd had a discussion about that way back, and I see in the report it says that we approved the 70,000, but I had thought that that accounting function was something that had been included in their contract previously, and that we weren't going to take on money for that. So those are the two questions I have for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll pass it to staff.
Great, thank you. Through the chair to Director Morin. With the procurement policy, currently this contract doesn't speak to ensuring they follow our policy. And, because they're an independent society, independent contract, it's hard to tie them to our practices. But we can consider in the future to integrate some of the language around procurement to ensure a fair due process in as a consideration. I think too, the layer within this one is that, the visitor center is owned by the society, but there's definitely all the participants of the service in the region have a vested interest in that facility and make sure that's managed and maintained appropriately. And also to just ultimately, it's expected that any upgrades or costs to maintain that asset will come back to the CVRD. So I think there is, if they're requesting funds of us to do such upgrades, we might want to add some layers in supporting that with the caveat that it's done through a public process, or that, through making sure that there's value for service in the works done. So, there's different ways we can layer that in to ensure value for money, ensuring that asset is well maintained. And as far as the 70,000 for accounting, my understanding that was a consideration when the contract was negotiated in the summer 2020, sorry. And was decided that it would have to live within the 800,000. But sort of through working on the liaison committee in the fall of 2020, we were kind of discussing with CVEDS about shared services and integration, and our CVRD finance team taking on the accounting of CVEDS to see some cost savings. However, we didn't quite get to the point that, seeing the level of detail or volume of activity of CVEDS to sort of understand for our team how to integrate. And then also to just with the service review that was announced through the town of Comox in kind of late 2020 and us going into our kind of budget year end, we sort of talked with the liaison committee and got their support to let's continue on with the existing contracts that they have through external bookkeepers and auditing for now, as we sort of work through this next few months of the service review and our busy season. And hopefully through that time, we have a much more understanding of their activities. So ongoing, we can look towards doing more shared services and see some cost savings. So it was related to sort of supporting that transition for the CVEDS and also our team here.
Great, thank you. And Director Hamir?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to staff for the presentation of the work plan and budget. I'm wondering if I'm looking at the same work plan that my fellow director from Comox is looking at, because I see 7 of our strategic priorities listed here, which for the first time I think in 3 years, I'm really happy with seeing all 7 of what we asked for integrated into a work plan. So I'm actually really pleased that a work plan like this has happened. So no harm to my fellow director from Comox, but like CVEDS is doing what we asked them to do, and finally, actually, this looks fantastic. My one concern, though, is I recall at a CVEDS board meeting in December where a work plan was presented. I was told by CVED staff that only 1 or maybe 2 of the strategic priorities would be worked on at all in 2021. And now I'm seeing all 7, which is, again, great. But I'm just wondering what happened between December and now. Because this work plan is not the work plan that was approved by the CVEDS board. And I just want to double check like what processes happened in between then and now to ensure that this is really the work plan of CVEDS moving forward.
As an independent board or independent society, the process that they undertook was their own. They took the input received by the board and are now submitting this for your consideration. That is the work plan. And so staff have no knowledge as to the process.
Okay. We have more questions. So Director Arbor?
I'll go with Director Grant. Zen was up first.
Well, since he started, I thought I'd give you the opportunity.
The bell tolls.
The bell is going across the street. Thanks. This is a budget meeting. I think there's a time and place for the types of discussions that the member from Comox is trying to bring to the table. Comox did trigger a service review where those very questions and concerns that he's expressing are being discussed and addressed. I would encourage that conversation perhaps is better situated there than in a budget meeting. In regards to the budget, I was part of the liaison committee, as was Director Grant. I'm actually seeing improvements in the proposed budget. And actually there are different types of items. Maybe they're getting bumped again, but asset management was not on the horizon at the time. It was a very different work plan, as Director Hamir pointed out, looking back at last summer and the kind of integration that we discussed doing with CVEDS. Now, whether that integration moves forward or not will be part of the service review. I don't think it belongs at a budget meeting. Overall, I think this budget is good. I thought our CFO did an excellent job at explaining the discussions happening between CVEDS and CVRD in regards to some of those items, and I'm fully supportive of approving it tonight. And the rest of the discussion can continue as part of service review. Thanks.
So just before we go to, oh, sorry, Mariah, did you want to respond? Okay. Before we go to you, Director Grant, if you are going to be discussing the contract changes, then I would suggest that we move in camera. Is that your intention?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Well, we're going in camera later anyway, aren't we?
Yes, we are, but we could go now if that's the wish of the board.
Well, I really don't want to pass this budget because I think there is just a whole lot of stuff in here that's completely unnecessary. The problem that we have is we've interwoven a budget now with a whole bunch of in-camera discussion that we've had in the past, and we can't talk about it at the same time. So that's creating an issue. But on the budget itself, like $50,000 for a service review, $50,000 to administer for administration for an $80,000 fund that we haven't actually decided what we're going to put in. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that just really doesn't make sense. And I don't want to pass this budget because once we do that, we're going to be back into this for like you're not going to get back out of this if that's the way you go. And it's really difficult to talk about when we've got a whole other discussion going on the other side.
Okay.
So I would prefer that we do not pass this budget until we at least have that conversation. And I'll be voting against this budget anyway because it really doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Madam Chair, if I could just talk about the process for the budget. So this budget that is presented is developed by staff on the best knowledge that we have available with respect to the obligations that you have for the contract and the resources that will be required to service that contract, plus the commitments that you've made for service reviews and otherwise. It is an estimate, and it also is a draft for your consideration. We're not asking for you to pass it tonight, but asking at least for approval in principle, or if the board wants to ask questions and wants us to dive into any of the things that are proposed here, please give us that direction so that we can come back to you with the information that you need to proceed.
Okay, well, I would propose that we go in camera and talk about the contract then.
Need a second. Oops, sorry.
Okay, so you're putting forward the motion to go in camera. That would be under section 91K of the community charter. Oh, sorry, yes, we are. So should we defer because we don't want to receive it? Yeah. Yeah. So I think we'll have a motion to defer and not receive at this point so that we could go in camera.
So you want me to move that? I'll move that.
Thank you.
Second.
Director Grant
Second.
and Director Swift. And
Speaking to the motion.
okay, go ahead, Director Arbor, to the motion. To defer. To defer receipt, and then we'll go into a motion for in camera.
Speaking to the motion to defer, I think it's a bit tricky. I'm not in favor of deferral because the member from Comox has made a number of statements and now doesn't want to let this discussion go on. I still have comments and they want to force it in camera. And I can't make the comments because we're on the deferral motions, I guess, of that I wanted to state before we go in camera. I think this is pure politics that the town of Comox is playing, so I'll be voting against the motion. Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess since my hand's up, I'm not sure how to proceed then because much of the conversation that's intertwined with this budget has been done in camera. And we can't talk about that. So the only way that we can have a discussion on this is either rise and report and talk about all the things that were in camera or go in camera and discuss it there.
Yes, it needs to be discussed in camera. And we can wait until the end of this meeting where we'll be going in camera anyway. And we can give the rest of the board the opportunity to speak to this budget proposal. Or we could do as has been put on the table now to defer and then go in camera. Director Hillian, you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure if the rule applies here that the only debate on a deferral motion is time and place. But that is my comment.
Well, it is time and place.
What is the intent of the deferral? Deferral to when? To later on in this meeting or to another date?
I think it's called, you put it on the table and you rise from the table, which means you defer it to the end of the meeting.
I think it's deferred till after the in-camera discussion. That is the.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor. It's been first and seconded to defer the receipt of this budget proposal till after an in-camera discussion. So I'll go through the roll.
And Madam Chair, I'll just confirm that the in-camera discussion is with respect to discussions of a contract for which you're permitted to go in camera. That's the sole purpose of going in camera.
Yes, under section 91K, it's community charter.
We're just going to confirm vote. Sorry, 208? Yeah, so it's just a 208 vote. One.
Okay, so yeah, just confirming with staff that it's a 208 vote, one person, one vote. And for the deferral, so we'll start with Director Arbor. Opposed. Director Hamir.
Opposed.
Opposed. Director Grieve.
In favor.
In favor. Director Grant.
In favor.
In favor. Director Swift.
In favor.
In favor. Director Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
In favor. Director Hillian.
Opposed.
Opposed. Director McCullum.
Opposed.
Opposed. Director Moran.
Opposed.
Opposed. And am I part of this vote? I'm not sure. Yeah. So I'm also opposed.
So it's defeated.
So the motion is defeated. So we'll go back to being on receipt. Director Arbor?
Thank you. The comment I was going to make is to Director Grant's comments, and the $50,000 item for the review was actually triggered by the town of Comox. So those are extraordinary costs that occurred because we didn't, we took an alternative course that is more expensive. So I think the budget is excellent. It reflects the reality of our commitments for this contract. And the rest, in regards to the future of the service, those discussions can occur in camera and as part of the service review. So I'm in favor of passing this budget. I think the staff did a great job in a very tough situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hillian?
Thanks, Chair. So my question to staff is on the implications of passing the budget at this time. My understanding is that although the motion that's recommended is that we approve, the plan be approved. My understanding from the CAO's comments are that that's a provisional approval and that there's going to be further work done. And that further work may actually be influenced by the service review that's underway and any other discussions that are going on, such that this budget could change substantially or even be withdrawn at a later date, depending on how those other processes carry on. Am I correct in those assumptions?
Yes and no. If you vote to approve the budget tonight, it's an approval in principle. And as Kevin alluded to earlier on in the evening, it's just giving staff confidence that it's somewhat in order, and apart from minor variations, we can proceed with including it in the bylaw, the budget bylaw, which is the ultimate approval of all budgets for the regional district. So really, it's not until the bylaw is in your hands and being considered that we're really at the final strokes of approval. I wish to caution you on the service review, because the timeline of the service review won't necessarily line up with tangible results or implications that will affect the budget in time for the bylaw. The schedule that's been proposed by the consulting services and considered by the participants in that is a little more prolonged than our budget process. But that's not to say that if you, the board, have questions and want more information from us before giving approval in principle and direct us to look at specific matters or otherwise, we can still do that to give you confidence that before you agree in principle to this budget.
Thanks. The point I wanted to make, and that's essentially why I voted against deferring right now, is that if this is passed provisionally, it doesn't hamstring the board from making different decisions around the expenditure of these funds at some point between now and final approval. So it just struck me that it was a cleaner process to give staff the support it needed in the event that this does go forward, and to leave the board still with the opportunity to have the discussions it needs to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Swift?
Thank you. I guess I'm just needing a little bit of clarification then. If we, pass this budget provisionally, but then we decide to do something different with the contract, where does that put this budget if it's beyond March?
The contract that you have with CVEDS has various clauses in it. One of them is the provision where either party can give 6 months notice if they wish to terminate the contract. That has not been contemplated by this board to this date. And but that, of course, if you were considering that as suggested by one of the directors, it is a process that requires time well beyond the budget, and requires that you live up to the commitments that you have with CVEDS in the interim.
Thank you. So I don't see any further questions. Oh, darn, Director Grant.
So I guess my point on all of this was that if we were to give notice of 6 months, that clock could start ticking sooner, which would mitigate a whole bunch of this money that's been put into this budget. We wouldn't need the accounting services. We wouldn't need to put money into a whole bunch of this stuff. So that's why I'm looking at that now. I'm also looking at, like I hear Director Morin talking about, can we tell them to go do this and that? Well, they have an independent governance model. This has been the trouble since day one. You don't get the ability on an independent governance model to tell them how to do their business. And as for the 7 items that we're looking at on here, in our opinion and in my opinion, there isn't one of those things that's an economic driver. And so that was one of the reasons why we started the service review in the first place, amongst other things, but that was one of them, is that we're going down a road that our community really isn't interested in. So that's why I wanted to move things forward. It's clear that there probably isn't support for that tonight, but I would really like to get all of the stuff that's in camera up and on the table so that we can actually have wholesome public discussions on this. And, you know, we've got a group out there that doesn't know what tomorrow brings, and it's been that way for a long time. And it's actually cruel to the employees. And I don't believe that it's fair to the public to have this running and going the way it's going with no indication of what we're doing. So those are the rationales that we have.
Yeah, just getting back, this is a budget discussion, and I think it's been put forward by other directors that it's quite acceptable budget. So try and stick to that. Director Arbour?
Thank you. I think we are hearing clearly that the town of Comox is dissatisfied with the service and the process. It may not be the case for the other participants and the board of the CVRD board. And so I'm just hoping we'll have a vote soon and find out where people are at in regards to this budget. Thank you.
Okay, so we still are on receipt, and it's a vote of Courtney Comox in the areas. Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed.
Director Grant? That's noted, and it passes. And we're on to a recommendation. Director Arbour?
Second.
Director Hamir? Seconded. Any further discussion?
Are we talking on the recommendation now?
Yes, we're on the recommendation.
I'll be opposed to that as well.
Okay, I haven't called it yet, but.
And you do.
All right, so yeah, it's for the proposed financial plan being approved. Any further discussion? And again, it's a vote of Courtney Comox in the areas. Anyone opposed? Director Grant?
I'm opposed.
Anyone else? Okay, that's been recorded. Thank you, and it passes. Now we're on to item 13.
Second.
Thank you. Director Arbour and Cole Hamilton for the Comox Valley Transit Service, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Mike Zabarski is here. And he will present the financial plan for the transit service and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell. Through the chair to the board, I have a presentation here. So this is a presentation for the 2021 to 2025 financial plan for the Comox Valley Regional Transit Network, Function 780. Okay. As many of you know, public transit addresses many of the Rethink Comox Valley principles, including mobility of citizens, especially vulnerable populations, youth and seniors, and also reduce greenhouse gases and providing an alternative to private automobiles. It also addresses a number of the strategic drivers that the board has identified, including the climate crisis and improving Indigenous relations. This fall, included in this budget is an expansion in the Back Road IR number 1 area. The impacts of COVID-19 on ridership and the upcoming 5th Street Bridge will be very big challenges in 2021. We are also looking at the latter as a bit of an opportunity to lure people into transit and attract them onto a different mode of transportation. The collaboration that we have with the city is key to this, and we're very hopeful that the city will be providing a transit priority lane or a bus only lane as part of the traffic management for that 5th Street Bridge project. And that will be really, I think, very instrumental in making transit an attractive choice during that project. So in 2020, obviously we had a pandemic, and that was a very significant impact on transit and made us very busy in a number of ways, dealing with reduced ridership and the reduced revenues that came with that. Looking at modified practices, whether it was how people boarded the bus, the cleaning, the PPE that bus drivers had to wear. We did a service reduction last year, earlier than usual to a summer level to save some money. We did a number of other cost savings measures, and we worked with the province on trying to find some additional funding to offset the fare revenue. And that luckily is a very significant amount of funding that we were able to receive from the province and the feds through the Safe Restart program. We spent a lot of time last year on transit infrastructure. We did a transit exchange and transit priority measure study that's going to be wrapped up early part of this year. We put in bus shelters at the downtown exchange in Courtenay, the downtown exchange in Comox. We started some park and ride projects in Fanny Bay and Black Creek that will continue this year. So a lot of work on transit infrastructure last year. We did start the Transit Future Action Plan last year. We had our stakeholder engagement sessions early in the year, and then after the pandemic came through, we put that on hold to be revived this fall. The other thing we did last year was a fare update. We introduced the day pass on board, so you can buy a day pass on the bus now, and we implemented a semester pass to make bus passes less expensive for high school students. We get an annual performance summary every year from BC Transit. Keep in mind, this is for their fiscal year, which was April 2019 to March 2020, so just before COVID. Things were looking very good on the ridership front. Conventional transit ridership was up about 11%, and paratransit, which is primarily Handy-Dart, was up about 6%. The table on this slide is the conventional transit service. Some stats for you. Our operating costs, and I'll just note the peer average is shown here as well. The peer communities that we're compared to are Cowichan Valley, Chilliwack, Campbell River, and Penticton. And one important note there is that only one of those is a real regional service. The other ones are very kind of municipal focused systems. But here's the stats for the conventional service. So we were $98.45 per operating hour in cost, which is a little bit more than the peer average, a little bit more than the previous year for the Comox Valley. And the rest is good news. Our operating cost per ride is significantly better than our peers and went down from the previous year. Rides per hour is higher than our peers and went up from the previous year. And operating cost recovery is better than our peers and also went up from the previous year. So some good news there too. Taking a bit of a deep dive on the performance of each of the routes. These are from fall of 2019. And you can see that ridership per hour is quite good, quite high on the routes that serve the dense parts of the community and have a higher level of frequency. Those lower ridership numbers are more the rural, less dense areas, and those routes that have less frequency. So this graph is a lot to take in, but this basically shows the the COVID-19 ridership impact. So you can see the blue line on the top is our 2019 numbers, and the green one is the 2020 numbers for annual ridership from January to December. In the beginning part of the year, the 2020 ridership was much higher in a lot of places than 2019, and then the big dive there in around March of last year. I think the good news with this graph is that it shows that we've been trending upwards since then, and things are continuing in 2021 in that direction. So our work plan for 2021 includes a number of projects. Obviously, the 5th Street Bridge project is going to be significant for us. That'll be 6 to 8 months of significant impacts on the schedule. There will be detours. There will hopefully be a bus-only lane and an opportunity to promote transit use instead of private automobiles during that period of time, and maybe even further. We're also going to be looking at a service expansion to the back road area in September. We have a community bus project on Hornby and Denman in the works as well, and you'll see in one of the recommendations on today's report that we're suggesting to increase the budget for that. We're going to wrap up the transit infrastructure study in March and bring that forward to the board and councils for their consideration. We'll also be working on the implementation plan for those transit infrastructure projects. And another study that we'll be starting this year is a transit operations and maintenance facility study. This is looking at our maintenance facility. It's currently owned by the private operator, PWT. And if we want to look at investing in electric bus charging infrastructure, we need to consider a publicly owned facility. There are a number of other benefits to that publicly owned facility. So we'll tease that around in this year and bring back a report to the board for consideration of options with that. We're going to continue to install bus shelters at key locations, and also to finish off the park and ride locations in the rural areas. Hopefully we'll be resuming our transit future action plan in the fall. One of the first parts of that would be to kind of get into this public consultation process that we never got to last year. And, hearing loud and clear from this board that they want to review other modes of transportation and have some comparison with transit and consider the board's roles in those other modes. We're going to do an assessment of those other options this year. On the left, might be a little hard to read, but it's our kind of typical timelines that we go through with BC Transit. So including the TIPS process, which we usually get in spring, which approves our service levels in the future. Any expansions will be considered as part of that. And it goes through to our performance summaries and our budgets. I'm not even sure I want to spend any more time on that because the timelines are so out of whack right now with COVID. We just received our tips, for example, in the last part of last year. So, but I'm happy to answer questions on that one later. Looking at the budget for 2021 in comparison to last year, I'll note some of the highlights for that. With a focus on the variances. So revenues are down about $311,000, and that's primarily because of the expected reduced ridership that we will experience this year with the pandemic. We've included a 40% reduction in ridership and bus fare revenue in 2021, and then in 2022 we've got a 25% reduction in those revenues. Our other revenue recoveries is up $128,000, and that's primarily to do with some provincial funding that we've received for the transit infrastructure study, as well as the park and ride improvements in the rural areas. Prior year surplus is also up $179,000. We did a really good job of finding cost savings last year. The province also provided some additional funding last year that really helped offset our revenues and allowed us to carry a bit of a surplus forward this year. Operating costs are down $239,000 and reserve contributions are up $245,000, primarily due to the almost $900,000 in safe restart funding that we received, which reduce our operating costs, but also they more than offset our revenue loss and it allowed us to actually contribute to our reserves quite healthily. Those reserves at the end of the 5-year plan will be at about $250,000. We're using them from year to year to kind of offset any increase in the requisitions. It should also be noted that this budget was prepared prior to receiving operating budget forecasts from BC Transit. Our initial review is indicating that the BC Transit forecasts are actually lower than we expected by at least $100,000. They're telling us it's primarily to do with some fuel savings that they're forecasting this year. And staff are suggesting to use that at an extra $100,000 per year for the next 3 years to support the Hornby Denman Community Bus Project. And with that, I'm going to leave it there and answer any questions the board might have.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions? Director McCullum?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report, Mike. I had a question around just how much ability the service has to adapt to demand as we approach the Fifth Street Bridge project. I imagine that as it is right now, that we are probably pretty close to having most of our buses out on the roads, you know, at the beginning of the day and servicing the high school routes. And I'm curious if we do see a big increase in demand for people to try and get across the river if we actually have the ability to add buses during those peak hours, or if we're kind of already at that point.
Yeah, through the chair to Director McCollum, we don't have a lot of flexibility. We've basically set our schedule for the year based on the traffic management planning work that the city has done. And because of our contractual obligations with the operator, we have to give them a certain amount of notice and whatnot. So that kind of limits our flexibility. The board has approved some additional service hours to allow us to maintain service levels, so the number of trips per day during this project. And that actually is bringing 3 additional buses into our system for that period of time. To go above and beyond that, I think would be very difficult to impossible. Now, saying that, I think we do have capacity within the system to absorb a fairly healthy increase in ridership, especially during those off-peak times. We do have to kind of keep in mind the COVID-19 bus capacity limits that are in place, but in those off-peak times, there is a fair amount of capacity in the buses, and that's definitely when we would be encouraging people to use transit.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I suppose my question is really around those peak times, because I know that there's times a day where the system is pretty burdened as it is. So, but it's great to know that there are some more buses coming on to deal with this. So thanks for the answer.
Next, we have Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. A fabulous job by staff in the response to COVID, just like with recreation and parks and all those services. I think, you know, our water and sewer services didn't get much affected by COVID, but just about everybody else did. And such good news to see that, you know, senior levels of government ended up plugging some of the leaks. I remember in March, we weren't too sure what was going to happen, and transit was definitely one of those services. I want to give kudos. I think part of why we're seeing the growth in transit and why we will continue to see the growth in transit use is the wise planning by the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay. I think seeing those rentals come online in the Walmart to Lerwick corridor, you know, I think the OCPs you guys have created and the densification plan is really going to support our transit system and help drive GHG reduction. So, you know, I think it's all an ecosystem that makes the system works. Of course, you don't expect that I'll just stay on that line the whole time. I did comment to staff that, you know, if we can go back to slide 5 or 6, and I did, so the rest of the board, so it's transparent, I did inquire to staff about looking at a formal transit review for transit, a bit like we're doing with CVRD, but they've talked me out of it because I think we can sort things out. But, you know, I'm glad to see the Hornby Denman thing work forward, but I'm still not sure that one is, and if it gets approved by the board, I think the Allens will be super excited, and it will provide an added value in the summer, potentially a great partnership with the school district. So I'm really enthused about that. But I think if we're going to continue to grow the transit system, we may have to look at apportionment at some point. So you've heard from me before, and I voted against the budget last year. The village of Cumberland pays about 130,000, gets 11 buses a day. They get the same rides per hour as Area A. And we get 5 buses a day with the number 10. And we contribute 350,000. So we contribute double and we get half the service. So basically we value the elders and youth and commuters of Cumberland by a factor of 4 more times than the people that live in Union Bay and Fanny Bay. And I think it makes sense that we may not want to have the same intensity of service in Area C and Area A, Area B over the long term. But then I think we need to address the apportionment. You know, if the beneficiary of the systems are primarily the municipalities, I don't think it's going to be defendable for myself and future area directors to legitimize the level of investment we're putting in a system that our residents don't have as much access to. So that's a more foundational conversation we can have in the future, but I cannot let go of it because people are conscious of it. The Hornby-Denman thing really helps. I think it's going to bring us back finally after years of paying 150,000 from the Allens. You know, if we do see 100,000 back that supports the service, because people basically have no service, that's wonderful. So that's just a comment. Overall, just really pleased by the work. If I think regionally, I think we're growing the system in the right way, and I think staff is doing a great way. It's just on the budget, the apportionment side that I have concerns. Thank you.
Can you bring up the list? Director Cole Hamilton?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Mike, for the report. It's you've dealt with a lot of different wild cards at the same time with COVID and the Fifth Street Bridge project. And just on the Fifth Street Bridge project, the city of Courtenay did approve at the end of last year the traffic management plan, which includes a priority lane for buses. So hopefully that's going to make buses a more effective part of the solution. And I just had a single question, which is on slide 6, there were 3 lines and one of them was orange and it just said recovery. And I was wondering if you could just, I don't know if we could see slide 6, explain what the line was for that. Is that projected 2021 or?
Yeah, that line is showing the percentage of recovery from comparing 2020 to 2019. So you can see where where the green line got closer to the blue line. We've recovered. It matches. Is it still on? Okay, so yeah, when those lines get close, the recovery percentage is higher. So that's just basically showing how close we were to our pre-COVID levels.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. I was just trying to piece that piece together. Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the report.
Any further questions? Okay, we're on receipt. And vote of the full board. Anyone opposed to receipt? And that carries. Thank you. And there's a recommendation.
Move recommendation 1.
Second.
Thank you. That's to approve the proposed financial plan for our transit service. Any further comments or questions? Again, a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. Recommendation.
Move to.
Director Grieve.
Second.
Director Cole Hamilton. And this is regarding the increases. Any further comments or questions? This is a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. And thanks to Mike. We're on to item 14. Parcel tax roll review. Director Arbor, move.
Second.
Director Hillian, second. And I'll pass it over to staff.
Where I will explain this annual process. I'm seeking volunteers.
Thank you through the chair. So as Russell noted, this is an annual process. So to set the parcel tax panel, which is all the electoral areas A, B, and C, as well as electoral area D, as we do have a parcel tax for the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Service. So what this process really does is ensure there's an opportunity for the public to essentially challenge the role. So all of the folios within these service areas that have a parcel tax attached to them, they can go and say, well, are you sure that my property is within that boundary? So that's sort of the standard regular process that's required through legislation. All of the parcel taxes in place are ongoing, long-standing parcel taxes, and also too, the rates have not changed from 2020 to 2021 on any of these services. So we don't expect in sort of folks coming forward, there's no new roles being put forward. These meetings are usually quite quick. Not many attendees because they are sort of a standard process. But again, it's just making sure the public has an opportunity to ask questions and make sure that who we've collected within that boundary is correct.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for our CFO? Okay, so we are on receipt, the parcel tax roll. And it's voted the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move it.
Second.
Poole, Hamilton, and McCullen. And the recommendation is that parcel tax roll review panel be held at 9:30 a.m. on Friday or February 18th, 2021 to authenticate the 2021 parcel and frontage tax roll, and that directors from electoral areas A, B, C, and the extraterritorial director for electoral area D, Strathcona Regional District, with respect to Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Service Area, be appointed to the panel. Any further discussion? And it's a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing none and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. We are on to new business. And the first item there is BC Clean Water Initiative funding application.
Move.
Second.
Grant and McCollum, thank you. And does staff want to speak to?
No, other than, well, just to explain that the town of Comox is participating in this grant proposal and seeks a letter of support from the regional district. A resolution to that effect will enable the chair to write a letter on your behalf to support the project.
Trevor?
Thank you. I really want to commend the town of Comox for this initiative. I'm involved with what's called the Bain Sound Ecosystem Forum, which maybe I'll update the board at some point. This is a multi-stakeholder group, and I was recently elected chair of it. And there's always big dialogues going around how to clean up debris from shellfish and also derelict vessel. And out of the blue, I was so pleased when I saw my agenda and saw that the letter from Mayor Arnott working on this application to do precisely what all these groups are trying to do. I really want to thank them. There's groups on Denman as well working on that, but I strongly encourage our board to support this application strongly. Too strongly in one sentence. There you go.
Thank you, Director Arbor. Any further comments, questions? Okay, we're on receipt. Vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there, Director Hillian moved the requested action. Sorry, and Director Arbor second. Any further discussion? And the requested action is that the CVRD board provide a letter of support for a joint application by the town of Comox and the Marine Tour Operators Association for a Clean Coast Clean Waters Initiative funding grant. And it's a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing, and that's carried. Thank you. And we're on to the addendum. And can I get, thank you.
Second.
Director Hillian and Director Hamir to consider the addendum. And as a vote of the full board, anyone opposed consideration? Hearing and seeing none, that passes. And so we will consider item 1, financial plan for the regional growth strategy and UBCM climate resolution.
Move the recommendation.
Director Arbor and Director Cole Hamilton, thank you. And so I'll pass it to staff.
This proposed resolution was provided with also some feedback on the RGS as well that was very positive. It is asking you to bring this forward to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. I think it runs along the lines of the support that you're providing to this initiative, and that is being provided across all local governments that are taking the initiative. I don't suggest that the board alter this resolution, but I would like to provide some advice moving forward on this matter. It is seeking sustained financial support for planning initiatives. I think that climate change and the initiatives that are being undertaken by local government are game-changing, and it is a complete shift in responsibility. I would really encourage you in your conversations with other local government partners that you be seeking a complete and utter shift in the way that local government is funded moving forward. If you're going to take this on your backs, which is a worldwide initiative, and it is necessary that local governments do, and local governments are stepping up, we're struggling with respect to the required financial resources just to meet our basic needs. We are looking at a $126 million improvement to water treatment, millions and millions of dollars invested in sewer treatment or otherwise, and you're going to take this on. I just think that local government needs new methods and means of revenue other than the predominant way of taxing your local citizens through their property. So put that out there, that as these dialogues go on, Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, UVCM and others, that really maybe this conversation expand to the province stepping up to the table and providing you new and alternative forms of funding, like the partners to the south that have the ability for various other means of taxation and various other revenues and greater support from their states and federal governments.
Thank you. Director Hillian, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Do we have any urgency around this? I know the word urgent is in the resolution, but what's the deadline for actually submitting resolutions to UBCM?
Just ask Jake Martins to come forward with respect to those deadlines.
Thank you, Russell, and through the chair. Yeah, I stand to be corrected, but I believe it's February 27th, so it's coming up fairly soon.
Thanks. I wonder if the board would support deferring this so that we could tighten up the wording. I don't think it's particularly well written. I certainly support the spirit and the intent, but I actually found it hard to read. It might just be me.
If it's the board's desire to bring this back for the meeting on the 23rd, by all means, we could do that at your direction.
Director Grieve.
Well, Russell just said it all. That was my point. Bring it back on the next one, 23rd.
So does someone want to make that motion? Oh, no, we're on receipt. Sorry. Director Hillian?
Well, I'd be happy to make that motion subsequent to receipt, but I'd also volunteer to submit some edits to staff for their consideration.
Thank you.
The son of a teacher.
So we are on receipt. Is any further comments? Okay, and this vote of full board. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried.
Move deferral to the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, Director Hillian and Director Grieve move deferral to next meeting, and there will be some edits in between. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. And we will move to in camera. Thanks, everyone. We'll also take a break.